The island was beautiful. There were some other beautiful young girls there. We all got together and we went to this really long table and started eating and hanging out, and that's when I met Jeffrey Epstein. When he said, oh, you lived in England for a while, do you want to meet a prince? There was a man that walked up at that moment, so he introduced me to him. It was very well known that Jeffrey knew princes.
Well, which one did you just meet?
I met a prince that was from England.
Andrew?
So after dinner, we went back to our quarters and got ready for bed. And so everything was great. And so that's when there was a knock at the door. But you can also see with the other girls that something's not quite right. And they don't really want me to go because they probably know what's going to happen to me, but they can't protect me. But you can tell that he loved that. He loved that control and even the fear we had. He was just a brilliant mind. He doesn't talk the way most men talk. And everything he says is for a reason. Every question is calculated and strategic. Now I'm going to explain to you what trafficking is. I'm flying to Los Angeles to go meet with a big movie director. There's an actual audition for an actual movie that's happening. So this isn't fake, this is the real deal. I talked to 9 other girls that was sent to the same director. Why were 10 of us sent from Jeffrey Epstein across the country to the same director? And it's so funny because when I would come back, Jeffrey always wanted to know so many details. There was an exchange between Jeffrey and I at that point that went dark. He was different, and that was the first time I felt scared. He had said to me, well, you know, Lisa, I like to have things on people.
The way you're explaining this is just a way that I've never heard it explained before. He's got tentacles in every arm of every industry. It's like theater, but it's real. The part's real. The movie director's real.
I just don't feel like he's the type of person that would ever need to take his life. He just had so much on people.
I would like to announce here today, us Epstein survivors have been discussing creating our own list.
We have the power to continue connecting the dots. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, it's awesome to have you. I've been looking forward to it. And so for people that aren't familiar with the story, I typically give people like a little intro in the beginning.
Okay.
So you are the host of the From Now On podcast, which is a podcast for other survivors to tell their stories and you give them a platform, which is awesome. You're also a speaker and advocate for survivors of sexual abuse. And your own story involves sexual abuse at the hands of Jeffrey Epstein, which we'll be talking about today. Which was over like a 4-year period, you know, at the island in New York where you're a Ford model. Yeah, I guess there's a couple things that I hope we get out of this today. Number one is I hope that this is therapeutic for you, you know, to tell your story, like to me and to us, like our listeners here. Number two is I hope that somebody out there can take something away from it. You know, I know you do this on your show too, and like it's all done to help people. And you know, if there's somebody listening out there that's going through something similar currently, or they have, and they just haven't been able to process it, I hope they can take something away from it. And then lastly, you know, I don't have to tell you, this has been this whole Epstein thing has kind of been covered up across administrations now on both sides of the aisle, and I think that we've talked about this on this show before, but it's a difficult one for me because like by covering up something like this, you're aiding and abetting the committing of that crime. And in this case, the crime is the sexual abuse and trafficking of children. So we're never going to be a part of that on this podcast. So it's an honor to have you like here to tell your story. So I appreciate you coming.
Thank you for saying all that. I really do appreciate it too.
So yeah, let's start it off at the beginning then, because I know you haven't really told your story on like a long form podcast like this. So yeah, tell us where you grew up and how you got into eventually modeling.
Well, I had a very interesting childhood. I grew up traveling. So 2 months old, born in California, moved to England, lived in Oxford, England as a child. And my father was a navigator in the Air Force. So we didn't live on the bases. We always lived off the bases. And we just did lots of really fun things. My dad was adventurous, and he also reffed soccer games in his spare time. So we spent a lot of time in soccer games. And I played a lot of sports. You know, I was played soccer. I was a cheerleader. I did lots of dance. I did beauty pageants. I did all that fun stuff as a kid. Gymnastics. I was always really competitive, played the piano. I mean, I just did so many things. My mom was wonderful. She was just a really great functioning mother, and cooked a lot. Her background is Indian, so she was a really great cook. And we traveled back to the States, lived in, Idaho and Virginia and Florida. And then my dad got orders when I was in high school to move to Belgium. And that's where I graduated high school. And during this time, my mother put me in pageants, and I got Miss Congeniality.
Oh, yeah?
And then modeling stuff. And I went to New York City at 16 years old for a national magazine. It was kind of a big deal back then. And that's kind of where I started. And when I lived in Belgium, I worked Brussels and like Amsterdam and then in London and started modeling and picking up. I was always tall and really thin, and I'm multiracial, so that was kind of not really the look back then, but it was interesting and exotic. So I was very different growing up. I didn't really fit in with a lot of, as you can see, I have a very outgoing, vivacious personality, which has gotten me pretty far as a youth, just making friends whenever we would travel different places. But I was always a little bit of a loner because I never really fit in with a lot of people, like really connected, just being multiracial. And, black girls didn't like me, and, white girls are different, and then it just never really stuck. So I always felt kind of alone a little bit, and I didn't really have those connections as deep as I wanted. And I feel like I'm kind of an empath and a deeper person, and I never really found those connections. So I always felt like I had a little bit of this loneliness in my earlier years.
Well, it's probably tough moving around a lot to I would imagine, I didn't have a similar life, but I would imagine you get to a place and you start making friends and then you leave and that sort of thing. Was it like that kind of? Or?
Well, yeah. I mean, that probably had a lot to do with it, right? I mean, 2 or 3 years here, made friends and then left. And then maybe you're right. I don't think about it. I probably was just putting up a defense. Don't get too close to them because I'm going to have to say goodbye to you pretty soon. So I probably was a little bit more like that. I mean, they say a lot of actors were military brats.
Really?
Right. Yeah, because I feel like you take on different personalities and you get to know different people, and there's a lot of deeper emotion, I feel, that comes with having to say goodbye every few years to people that you form relationships with. So I think I always had a little bit of that. Felt a little bit different growing up. Yeah.
Well, that's interesting. I actually haven't thought about that. How kind of moving around a lot, what that sort of impact would be on your personality and how you interact with people, and even in your I don't know, romantic relationships. If you don't let people get close to you, maybe that's been built into you from a young age. That sort of thing. Yeah,
that was probably, as we'll talk about, having to do a little bit more of circumstances that, I was always like that with relationships, never really got close to people, men, didn't date a lot. And when I did, never really fell in love. I didn't even fall in love till I was 40, just a few years ago. So that's, a lot of people are like, wow, that's crazy. But yeah, I never really fell in love when I was in my 20s. And, I got married in my 20s, but I was never really in love. So yeah, gosh. I had those kind of issues growing up. Yeah.
So was that falling in love thing, was that something that you realized recently? Did you think you were in love at the time?
No.
Oh.
No. I never felt that in love feeling. There were people that I loved, that I cared about, but I never had that falling in love where you're mad crazy about the other person. I just never had that in my 20s. And the stuff that we're going to talk about today happened in my early 20s. And I'm sure that had a lot to do with it. Yeah. And then I was already kind of a working model and knew exactly what I wanted to do as a very young age. I wasn't one of those people like most kids. I would say 99% of most kids don't have a clue what they're going to do at 18 or 22. And when I was 13, 14, 15, I knew exactly what I was going to do. And I've been doing that throughout my entire adult life. I wanted to be in the modeling industry, and I wanted to be in acting and the entertainment world, and just doing what I do was just what I always saw myself doing. So I was very much locked into that since I was really young.
Okay, so at what point do you start, like, actually, how old were you when you started getting gigs, modeling gigs?
16. And then when I moved over to Europe, I started working with an agency in Brussels. And so I started working from there. And then when I left home after high school, I worked in London for a little while, and then I found myself in Miami. Late 90s, like the heyday of the modeling business with all the big modeling agencies, all the celebrities, all the movies and TV commercials. And I started working pretty much right away. I kind of just had that look, and I realized I had the personality for TV. So I did tons of TV commercials. And then from there, I lived in South Africa for 6 months. Well, a lot of people don't know that's a big modeling market. So a lot of models travel there.
Why?
Well, a lot of models, to build their book, their portfolio, they can't just go to New York, or Paris. You have to build in smaller markets like Los Angeles, Miami, South Africa, Greece, and you go to these other markets to build your book and your experience. That's the real modeling world. It's not like that today. Now you're just like an influencer, and you just, tweak your pictures online and build your own brand yourself. It wasn't like that. In the late 90s and the 2000s, you really had to be a career model, and you had to take care of your skin and your body and be in the best shape. And it was a business, and I took it really seriously. And so I traveled to Greece for a few months, and I lived in South Africa. And then my base was in Miami. And then from there, as I built my book and my expertise and all that stuff, I was like ready for New York. So I moved to New York in the late 90s, like 1999.
So was there like, I guess so you started at 16 and then you move and like you're doing this for a couple of years at that point. What was your kind of like assessment of the industry? Like obviously we're going to be talking about some things that are very inappropriate today about like, powerful people kind of using power as leverage. Like did you pick up on any of that when you first started? Was there any of that going on?
Good question. Yes. I've always seen those things going on. I always noticed that agents were okay if you came back from a shoot with a photographer or with a crew and you said, oh, that guy was kind of inappropriate, or he tried to touch me. I was like, oh, this is just the business. Don't worry about it. Or that's a really important photographer, kind of like, I was like, oh, okay. So I kind of noticed that stuff happening when I was in Europe. And in Miami a little bit. I didn't have like major things that happened, but definitely you saw your bigger agents taking you to parties, and you were a bunch of young girls, and there were older men or their friends, and there was a lot of drugs around, and they would be okay with handing you drugs to do with them. So, but prior to those days, I was like, ew, I'm not doing that. I kind of had, because of my upbringing, my dad was a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force. He was very strict, and I grew up having a curfew, and I couldn't go out and do anything. So I think, thank God, my parents taught me a lot of morals and values, and I had that. So I feel like in the early stages, I stood up for myself really good. I actually booked a big TV role, a movie role with Oliver Stone for Any Given Sunday. I'd auditioned for that, and I was getting into acting and doing a bunch of acting classes. And on the first day of this on set, he had groped me, and I was just like, like shocked, and I literally like pushed back, like, what are you doing? And I said it so loud, everyone on the whole set turned and looked at me, and he was like, you're dismissed. And I lost my role.
No
just
way.
Like that. Yeah. And I realized, oh shoot, you're not supposed to say anything. You're supposed to just be like, oh, like, stop, and just kind of let them think something. I realized pretty quickly, like, actresses are just like kind of put up with it, when they do stuff like that. Because he didn't really do anything wrong, but he did right up my skirt, right where I could feel them. So it was wrong.
I would say that's wrong.
Yeah, no, it was wrong.
Objectively.
Yes, but the way I reacted to it, I was just so naive and just like, I reacted in such a harsh way that literally I was done and cut from the set. So he was just like, you're done. And I was like, huh, what, huh? Like, and I just looked at him, I was like, oh, I knew he was serious. And I just left. But then I was like, I called my agent and was like, no, I'm not done. What do you mean? I like worked hard. I'm a real actress. I've done like 30 TV commercials. That was like a big deal back then. And I was like, can you just like say something? And they're like, no, we don't want to say anything. And I was like arguing about, say something or I'm going to say something. Because I was like, why did I lose a role just because he grew up me? And so my agent did say something. And I ended up getting another role. That's so funny. The very next day he replaced me. And I was on a casting, because it's a small community in Miami. And I heard another model who looked just like me. She was like, yeah, I got booked for a role with Oliver Stone's movie. And da-da-da-da, and I'm playing opposite LL Cool J. And I was like, oh, that was my role. And I was like, oh, that's funny. That's why I called my agent. I'll come back to me because I haven't talked about this. And that's why I called my agent, because I was pissed off that I was replaced by like a Lisa lookalike, you know?
Yeah.
And so that's why my agent said something. And then he ended up saying, you know what, bring Lisa back. And I was brought back, but you know what? Oliver gave me an upgrade because now I was opposite Jamie Foxx. And now I had a couple lines instead of my one little line. And he put me with Jamie Foxx. And that ended up actually catapulting my career, even though it was a couple lines. Everybody saw me on the big screen. And speaking up actually worked in my favor, you know? So I was like, okay, I've got this. Okay, I can speak up. Things happen. You know, I was confused a little bit about whether that was a good thing to do or not. But, you know, I got a little role out of it, you know, a bigger role out of it. And I actually had seen Oliver years later. Well, it wasn't even years, probably a year later. And, you know, hanging out with a group of friends. And he had actually kind of apologized to me. You know, I mean, his behavior didn't change that much. I'll tell you that. But I think he kind of respected that I said something. And I think most people don't.
Do you think that he brought you back because he respected that you had the balls to say something, or because he was worried about what the implications might be if you just like kept telling people about it?
Probably both. I mean, I don't think back then, I remember this is 25 years ago, and you know, I was like a teeny bopper. I don't think he was scared of me at all, because actresses don't speak up. They're kind of doing it now, little by little, but most of them don't. I don't know what made me do it in that moment, because I definitely turned into a person who didn't speak up. So
getting older hits harder than we all expect. One day you wake up with stiff joints, recovery from the gym takes longer, your hair's thinning, your nails are breaking, and your skin just doesn't have that same smooth glow anymore. So aging sucks, but it doesn't have to. So that's where Bubs Naturals collagen peptides come in. Starting in your mid-20s, your body starts producing less collagen every year. And collagen is the glue of the body. It's the protein that holds everything together. With Bubs, you can help restore those collagen levels closer to what they were at when you were younger. That means stronger joints, healthier hair and nails, smoother skin, and faster recovery. And it's super easy to use. All you have to do is mix it into your coffee or your juice or your smoothie, whatever you drink in the morning. And it's tasteless, odorless, and dissolves instantly. There's no clumps or weird aftertaste. And here's what makes Bubs truly different, and a big part of the reason that we partnered with them here at the show. The brand is a tribute to former Navy SEAL Glenn Bub Doherty, an American hero who gave his life saving Americans in Benghazi, Libya. Glenn's call sign was Bub, and he was the kind of guy who always pushed for self-improvement and helped everybody around him. And that DNA is woven into the Bubs brand. And to honor him, which is awesome, Bubs donates 10% of all their profits to charity, starting with the Glenn Doherty Memorial Foundation. And lastly, Bubs is built to the highest standards. No junk, zero sugars, no sweeteners, no fillers. It's third-party tested, NSF certified for sport, Whole30 approved, and sustainably sourced from grass-fed, pasture-raised cattle. It's trusted by over 100,000 customers and was named Best Collagen of 2024 by Health.com. So for a limited time only, our listeners are getting 20% off of Bubs Naturals if you use code Dalton at checkout. Just head to bubsnaturals.com and use code DALTON and you're all set. And after you purchase, they'll ask you where you heard about them. Please support the show and let them know that we sent you. If you're a homeowner in America, this applies to you. The FBI has been warning about a type of real estate fraud on the rise called title theft, and your equity is the target. So here's how it works. Criminals forge your signature on a single document, use a fake notary stamp, and file it with the county. And just like that, on record, they own your home. And then using your ownership, they can take out loans against your equity or even sell your property. And you won't know about it until foreclosure or collection notices show up in the mail. That's why we've partnered with Home Title Lock, so you can protect your equity and find out today if you're already a victim. So if you use the promo code Dalton at HomeTitleLock.com, you'll get a free title history report and a free trial of their $1 million triple lock protection. That's 24/7 monitoring of your title records, urgent alerts to any changes, and if fraud occurs, their US-based restoration team will spend up to $1 million to fix it. Again, that's promo code Dalton, DALTON, at HomeTitleLock.com to protect your equity today. Back to the show. Well, I'll tell you, I've been thinking about this, like, and you mentioned kind of, you started talking about like on your first shoots, there was people were kind of like, shh, like you said, shh, like as in kind of keep quiet about it. And then in this case, you mentioned, you know, being on a movie set where everybody else that's kind of working on the set is like, just, you know, and I wonder just what that is, you know, and there's an element of it where people want to, for example, keep their mouth shut because they want to get something out of it, you know.
Or not lose their job.
Right. They want to advance their career. But there's also this other like human nature element of it to me. And we'll talk about this with, you know, the Jeffrey Epstein stuff. But what people think, how principled do you think that you are? I feel like people are, the situation kind of dictates how they act. Like, oh, if everyone else is doing it, then I'm doing it. I'm going to disregard my own morals and principles just because this is normal. Right. Everybody else tells me that this is normal, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I think anyone watching could see like, oh, wait a second, that wasn't okay. But no one's going to say anything. No one was going to speak up for me. I was practically at that stage like a glorified extra. It wasn't like I was this big name. I don't even think if I was, they would have said anything. I think it's just people keep quiet. When they see more powerful people getting away with things, they let them get away with it. When they see powerful people doing things that are inappropriate, they let them get away with it. They're enabling, and they don't know they're enabling. But they feel powerless to say something.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm not pointing the finger or trying to blame. I'm just trying to, I get curious about these sort of human nature based outcomes, like, you know, how you would react in a certain situation. But so again, I haven't heard you talk about that one, but does anything else stand out from that time period before, I think it was 2001, where you ended up getting the shoot in the Virgin Islands? Like what happened to what we're talking about on movie sets to then? Does anything else stand out that was, you know, along the lines of what we're talking about?
That was only a few months before what happened on the island.
And you were 21 at this point.
I was probably 19, 20 when I shot Any Given Sunday. And then a few months later, I moved to New York City. And then I started working with an agency there. And they were a pretty big agency. And so I was doing lots of really great shoots. I was basically a catalog model. But working 5,000, 7,000 a day. And that was the money back then. Yeah, it was good. Saks, Eddie Bauer, these types of clients, shooting all over for it, going to Hawaii, going to the Caribbean. So I was a working model, and it was going really well. I was doing TV commercials, all the ones that I saw as a young teenager and I wanted to do. And I was doing those commercials. So I was just living, my dream. I was enjoying living in New York City. Yeah, so it wasn't until a full year later. It wasn't a full year later when I got the big job to shoot a cover of a magazine, a British magazine, in the British West Indies. So it was my girlfriend and I. We were both with the same modeling agency, this beautiful, tall Polish model, and the crew. So we all flew down to Tortola, right? And did the shoot there for a few days. And a lot of people don't know this either, but the photographer of that shoot was like this good-looking blonde guy. He wasn't old. He was, I don't know, maybe in his 30s. And he liked me, and he kept kind of hitting on me and, doing all this little stuff. And I'm sure that's why he booked me, because that kind of happens. They're going on a trip, photographer. Let's book the models I kind of like. I'm not saying anything bad about him, but he kind of made me a little uncomfortable a couple times. And so the other model was like, we have a free day. Like, I have a friend who's this really great guy. He owns an island nearby, and he's done some really great things for me. He helped me get my visa to live here in the U.S., and she talked him up and was like, we can just go hang out at his island. And so I was like, yeah, well, kind of want to get away from this guy. You're not leaving me alone with this guy, because I knew, I was kind of feeling what was happening. So I just kind of wanted to get away from him. So I was like, oh, it'll be safer if I go with you. And just whatever she was saying just sounded good. I'm this young girl, like an island. This sounds kind of fun. You trust him. Might as well go. So the person sent a boat, and we got on the boat, and we went over to the island. And so the island was beautiful. It was a gorgeous island, and there were some other beautiful young girls there. And we just hung out by the pool, and I had observed there was like an older man there, like a sophisticated older man. He had this kind of way about him, and he had dark hair, and he was frolicking a little bit with one of the other young blonde girls in the pool. And I kind of just observed, older guy again, younger girls. But whatever, I'd seen that a lot in the modeling industry. So we just hung out, and we had a really good time, and then we got ready for dinner.
Sorry to stop you. How old were the girls?
I'm not sure how old the girls were. I remember I was young at the time, so to me, the girls were probably the same age as me. And thinking back on it, I'm sure they were probably told not to say they were underage. I was assuming they were probably 18 or 19. And I can't remember if they discussed if they were older or not. We just didn't have those conversations, And so, and if we did, they probably said they were 18 or 19. So we got along. It wasn't like, oh, they're much younger. We just got along, and we had a really good time. And so we got ready for dinner, and there was like this outdoor shower, and I don't know, the place was really cool. And so I felt really comfortable at that stage, and we all got together, and we went to this really long table with tons of really amazing like seafood and food and fruit, and started eating and hanging out. And that's when I met Jeffrey Epstein. And so he waltzed in, and, and I'm going back from my memory from then. I thought he was charming and really had great energy about him. And he made me feel very special. He sat down, and he laser focused right on me because I was the new girl, and he knew everybody else there. And he knew everyone else there very well. And so he started talking to me, probably just to feel me out, right? And I was always pretty sophisticated. I had this kind of elegance about me, even when I was younger, just because I grew up in Europe for a lot of my life, and came from this Air Force background where we hosted a lot of events or dinner parties and things like that. And so I was very cultured. And so I think he was intrigued by that and wanted to know a lot more of my story. And, I let him know I lived a few years in Oxford, and he found that interesting. And I knew a little bit about traveling and art. And I got to talk about, all these wonderful things of my childhood and travels where, most guys, when you meet them, they don't ask you these kind of questions, right? It's more like on the surface types of things. And most guys don't really give a shit to really get to know you. Jeffrey did. But Jeffrey was like trying to go for those emotional things, like really asking about my family and my life. And I think he was really trying to see how connected I was to my family, what type of parental guidance or figures I really had in my life. And I wasn't close with my father, and he never really called me to check up on me. And I do remember talking about that kind of stuff because he triggered something in me. So we had a little bit of a bonding moment. I mean, in hindsight, that's the grooming process. But I mean, obviously I wasn't thinking like that at the time. I was just thinking, wow, a guy, you know, and he was more of a mentor, older type of fatherly figure to the girls. He was not a playboy. He wasn't the type where you're thinking he's just like a Hugh Hefner and making all these crude jokes and things like that. He was definitely, when he spoke to the group of girls, it was more of a mentoring thing about asking about, you know, your ambitions and things you really wanted to do. That was his way of talking to you. It wasn't at all to make you feel uncomfortable. So in those couple hours, I felt really comfortable, and I actually kind of liked the guy. I was like, wow, he was really interesting. Hey, you know, this is cool. You know, you're right. What a great guy. And the conversation was great. And when he said, oh, you know, you lived in England for a while. Do you want to meet a prince? And so I was like, yeah. And there was a man that walked up at that moment. So he introduced me to him briefly, and I met him. And he walked away, and that was just super brief. And
this was the prince?
Yeah, it's the prince. And the girls talked a bit about a prince. So I'm not quite sure if it was this prince or other princes that were there. But, you know, it was very well known that Jeffrey knew princes.
Well, which one did you just meet?
I met a prince that was from England.
Andrew?
So he was from England. So he wasn't a Saudi prince or those type of princes that the other girls talked about.
Can I ask you a question? Why, if it was Andrew, why wouldn't you want to say so?
Well, it's not that I don't want to say so. I've actually been in documentaries about him.
Right.
And if we're fast forwarding, the whole reason why I spoke out was because of what I knew about him. And so I just feel like it's a different time right now. And I feel a little uncomfortable saying names right now. I just do. It's already out there. If people want to do their little research and see, you know, that's what people do these days. I mean, you can see who I'm talking about. But I get weird now about talking about names. I just do, especially now that, you know, I'm spoken out in Congress and people are like, these names, this list. It just don't feel like it's my responsibility to keep saying these names. The people who have the power to do something about it, they know the names.
And by the way, like we talked about this off camera, and I told you, let's not go anywhere you're not comfortable going. I didn't ask you that because I want you to say it. I asked you that because I want to understand why you would be hesitant to. And I think people might be curious about that too. So again, it's not one of those things where I'm asking you to, It's just, I'm curious about why you wouldn't want to, so.
I mean, it's a good question, right? Did I answer the question though?
Yeah, no, 100%, 100%.
Okay. That's why now things have changed a little bit.
So you meet Prince X.
I met a prince. And it was a big thing to Jeffrey to
How do you
say,
mean?
oh, you met a prince. I'm introducing you to a prince. Like, you're special. You get to meet this prince. Almost like, in hindsight, he was making me part of the group. He didn't have to introduce me to that prince. Right? He didn't have to make it known. So I had a great dinner. And I felt good. I felt it was a little special. Like, this, you know, I'm here at this beautiful island and this person seems to kind of care about me. And I didn't really have those fatherly figures. And so he triggered something in me that meant something to me, to have that. And I kind of always looked for that in my life, right? I still do to this day. I like having mentors, and I like people who are older than me that I can learn things from. And he was just a brilliant mind. He's just a brilliant person to listen to. He doesn't talk the way most men talk. And everything he says is for a reason. He doesn't talk a lot, but everything he says is interesting. every question is calculated and strategic that I think makes the group feel something. So I think that's what he was setting up with me. And he did a perfect job of it.
So up until this point, you felt with him, you didn't get from him that he was, like hitting on you or like was interested in you in that sort of way. It was very much like a mentor, sort of like, this is just a nice guy and he's interested in me because he's benevolent, sort of thing.
Well, I mean, yeah, I'm not thinking really anything except for I'm just here with my girlfriend, meeting new people, and I didn't think he was interested. You have to remember, I'm like this multicultural, mixed race type of girl. I looked very different from everyone else sitting at the table. So I could see maybe he had a type. I'm aware that men have types and things like that. So, and the girl who brought me there was blonde too. And, she had mentioned like, oh yeah, he likes blondes and stuff like that. It's not a big deal. Because, I had been like, is this guy gonna hit on me? I had asked her that. Oh, no. Like, he has this type. And I could clearly see, what his type was. So I wasn't really thinking anything like that.
And the reason I ask is because, again, you'd been in the industry, you'd been like presumably or had men that were interested in you. So you were old enough to kind of understand what the vibes were from someone. So I was just curious if you felt any of that from him at that point, or if it was all just this mentorship thing, Well,
that's why I wanted to do this, because it's so important to get the backstory. And once you paint the picture, then it's like, don't you understand now? Right? You have to understand that someone who's grooming you is different than someone who's just hitting on you. Someone who's grooming you wants you to feel so safe that later on, whenever it happens, it could be 3 hours later, it can be 3 years later. But they're grooming for a reason, to get you to trust them. If I sat down and this man was just hitting on me, all of a sudden I'm just like, ew, gross, older man, what are you doing? Why are you talking to me like this? You're never going to get anywhere with me. You're probably not going to be able to abuse me later. But there has to be a way. There has to be a way of getting you to put your guard down and to feel like they're on your side a little bit. That is the difference when it comes to a predator. They're calculated. It's not I'm hitting on, what were you doing at the island? Like I was brought by another girl the same age as me, right? A lot of people think, why didn't you run? I mean, there is a body of water around. Like stop. It's enough already.
Yes.
Like we're young girls. We're not supposed to be there with old men. Obviously, there has to be something else going on. Just please use your mind to think a little bit differently about things. That's why I created the podcast, was just to get an understanding of how millions of people are groomed every day. Okay, so just saying that, because it kind of makes me a little bit mad when people ask those questions, because it's like, are you kidding me? Like I'm in a little island in the Caribbean, like I wasn't supposed to be there. Now you have to understand how I got trapped into this situation. I wasn't expecting that. I was just on my cloud nine, doing a photo shoot, feeling amazing. My career was going where I wanted. I felt like everything was happening the way it was supposed to happen for me until that day. That's a day that changed everything for me. Nothing was the same after. So after dinner, we went back to our quarters and got ready for bed. So everything was great. And so we were just going to go to bed, and we were chatting and hanging out together. And that's when there was a knock at the door. And one of the other young girls knocked on the door and said, Jeffrey is ready for his massage. So that's when things changed, because now I'm like, what massage? And so this is the first time she says to me, oh, well, like almost like, oops, like I didn't think it was going to happen, because maybe she didn't think it was going to happen with me, but she's like, Jeffrey likes massages and we have to do a massage. I'm like, well, I don't know how to do a massage. What are you talking about? Oh, it's a real massage. We're going to give him a real massage. So we had this kind of banter back and forth. Like, what are you talking about? Well, I don't want to do it. You go do it. And I'm going to stay here. And I think she thought about it for a minute because she was like going to go do it by herself. And then she had a talk with the other girl and she was like, she has to go. And I remember being like, why do I have to go? Like I was so confused in that moment, but you can also see with the other girls that something's not quite right. And they don't really want me to go because they probably know what's going to happen to me. But they can't protect me. And they're there too, and they have to do what he wants them to do. So she said, we have to go. And I was like, she was like, just do what I do. So I'm like, okay, well, I'll just go give a creepy man a massage. Well, he wasn't a creepy man at that stage. I was just like, I'm just going to give this old guy a massage. Fine. So I didn't really think anything of it at that point, except for, okay, well, this wasn't what I was expecting. So I just went with her and went across the island to his bedroom area, walked in the door, and then this guy that I saw at dinner earlier now is naked on a massage table, head down. And I just looked at her like, okay, all right. And so she brought me over. We started doing an actual massage, you know. So people hearing this at home, no, Jeffrey actually likes massages. And he actually taught me how to do a real massage. So everything was kind of okay. I mean, the banter with him changed. It was very different. Now it's a little playful, a little like, oh, do you have a boyfriend? Like, you know, like questions like that. And so it was like a thing between the other girl, myself, and him. Two young girls in the room with this guy who's in his 40s. So it was already a weird situation. Just this situation is weird. So we give a real massage. And he teaches me how to like close my eyes and do the massage and feel the muscles and all this stuff. I remember that because they were real massage techniques. And then she was doing the massage and stuff. And then maybe after like 15 or 20 minutes, it was a while, then that's when everything changed. And so at that point, he wanted to shift the energy in the room. It went more sexual. And he started to bring out like stuff, tools or things. And then he started to do those things, you know, with her. And then, you know, she's looking like, you're looking at me and she's looking at me almost just like, it's just like not a fear, but like just go through the motions kind of thing. And I was just kind of locked in on her, couldn't really look at him. And it just was an odd thing. But you can tell that he loved that. He loved that control of the two girls and even the fear we had, or like the knowing that we didn't want to do this because we weren't like, hey, let's do this. Let's get into this. And we weren't like, a man knows when two girls are really into something. It's not. And also Jeffrey likes you very present. There was no drugs. There was no alcohol. He'll never had alcohol there. So this is a fully present situation. I don't know what's worse, but this was very present. And, you know, he just went on to abuse both of us in that situation.
So, and this is something I've thought about with him, and I'm glad you brought that up. If you or I were in a normal, intimate situation with someone else, and someone else started showing signs of being uncomfortable with what was happening or scared or anything like that, you or me would stop and say like, hey, is everything okay?
Yeah.
And that's always something that I've thought about with him, because in these types of situations, you know, you have innocent girls like you who were presumably very visibly afraid. And like, you know, he's just spent all this time, these past couple hours, like really kind of getting his hooks in and getting you comfortable with him to trust him enough. And now you're just kind of thrown into this situation and you don't know what's happening and you're scared. And you were presumably visibly showing that. It's one thing for someone to just move forward in that situation and continue to do what they want to do to themselves or whatever. It's another thing to actually have that be what's getting you off. So is that your assessment that that's what he actually like got off on, is just the fear and discomfort of abusing children?
Yeah, that's another thing with serial predators is that it doesn't have to be just sex, right? I think a lot of people are like, well, he's not having sex, so he's not like penetrating you. But a lot of times that's not what they want. They just want that control of the situation to do something or to make you do something that he knows that you're in fear of or don't want to do. And like you said, in a normal situation, I'm like people like threesomes and things like that. Usually it's 3 active participants enjoying it. And you're also well aware normally that if someone's like not into it, you're like, okay, this is not going to feel good to me because you're not into it, right? But that's not the case when it comes to these types of predators. I don't give a shit that if you're into it or not. You're going to do it because, I just spent a couple of hours, making you comfortable with me. Now you're confused. He knows you're going to do it. He knows you're not going to run away, so he knows you're going to be uncomfortable. And he can see that she was also uncomfortable too, because I don't think she was expecting that to happen. But he didn't care in that moment. He just wanted to get off. He had his stupid little silly grin on and just was like whacking off and just like all super excited. I don't know how that excites you, but he was super excited. And he did finish, so apparently this is what this is his MO. I didn't find this out later, but this is what he does. So I just described this is Jeffrey Epstein and what he likes. So we just left as quick as we could, but we were in there for quite a while and went back to the room, and that's just when her and I kind of talked about it, but not really. It was like you could tell that she didn't really know what to say. And that's the problem too, when she's also has been groomed by this person. He's done so many things for her. She's loyal to him too, in a way. So, she set me up and she did these things and she feels bad about it. But, she's also can't do anything about it because she doesn't want to lose her visa. She doesn't want to lose her career and things like that. So this is what I know now. It's not what I knew then. So we're just sticking to then. She's just like, I'm just sorry. I'm sorry. I didn't know he was going to do that. I figured he, wasn't going to do that with you, but now I stayed up that entire night. I remember just like sitting there, like looking at the ceiling the whole night, like scared to death that it was going to be another knock at the door and then he was going to want me back probably by myself. And I was just like hoping and praying, that I was just going to be safe. And I was just thinking, is this what the other girls are doing? Like, no wonder they all have this like weird look in their eyes, like kind of didn't, they liked being there, they liked him, but they didn't really, or super comfortable with it. It was something I can pick up on those things. And I remember thinking that back then because I had that whole night to think about it. Like, this is a weird situation. These men are both older. We're all really young. He's making me do something he knows I don't want to do. I had all these things going in my head. I just did not like this guy anymore. And I couldn't wait to get off. And I remember as soon as that boat arrived, we just, as quick as we could, like ran to that boat, jumped on it. And then I remember I have a picture of the island, from the boat. I still have that picture. And it's like, I remember being like, I will never go back there again. I will never go back there again. And I did not like that man at that point.
With everything going on in the world these days, it's easy to focus on things that are completely outside of our control. It's something that I'm trying to work on myself and instead replace what I can't control with what I can control, which is my own health and self-improvement. So for me, my health is my baseline, right? You have one life. If you don't have your health, then literally nothing else matters. And for me, this starts with daily exercise and what I choose to put in my body every day. So that's why me and over 60,000 people this year decided to make one simple change: start taking creatine. So there's a lot of misconceptions out there about what creatine actually is. It's not some steroid or something like that. You already consume a little bit of it from foods like meat and fish, and it helps your body create more of its own natural energy. And it's the same energy that your muscles and brain run on every day. Taking 5 grams of creatine per day will make you feel stronger, more focused, you'll recover faster, you'll have more energy, and build more muscle overall. The only problem with creatine powder traditionally is it's gritty like sand, it doesn't really taste good, and it becomes a hassle to remember to take every day. So Tasty Gains has solved that problem with their creatine gummies. These are the pineapple mango, which are great. My 2 favorite flavors are the blue raspberry and the strawberry creamsicle. These taste like candy. They're also non-GMO, vegan-friendly, and made in an FDA-registered facility. So Tasty Gains holiday sale is now live, and this is the craziest sale that they've ever done. You can lock in a lifetime deal where any amount of creatine you buy, you'll get the same amount for free. There's no limit. And you'll have the choice to get your creatine shipped every month or every 3 months as well. So I'd never recommend a supplement that I didn't believe in, but if you go to tastygains.com/Dalton, you can try it absolutely risk-free, no strings attached. Most people out there are still drinking sink water or buying plastic bottles thinking that they're clean. But the data is brutal. 70 million Americans have forever chemicals in their water. And bottled water contains hundreds of thousands of microplastic particles per liter. Pitcher filters like Brita only remove 23% of arsenic. Cove Pure, however, removes 99.9% of the bad stuff. That's why here at the studio, we switched to the Cove Pure reverse osmosis system, because I don't want to gamble with what's in my water. PFAs, microplastics, heavy metals, all of it. This machine gives you instant hot or cold water, which is awesome, real-time purity readings, and a 4-stage filtration that catches contaminants down to 0.0001 microns. No installation, no maintenance headaches, just clean water on demand. And right now, for a limited time only, our audience gets $200 off a Cove Pure system if you go to covepure.com/Dalton. That's COVE.com/DALTON for $200 off a Cove Pure system. Back to the show. So did this other girl, how long had she been involved with Epstein prior to you guys going there?
She had known him pretty well. She was Eastern European. And Jeffrey had a lot of ties to model agencies that had a lot of Eastern European. They scouted Eastern European girls, placed them in Paris. And through that agency, Jean-Luc Brunel, I mean, a lot of people know about him. Through that agency, he would send these girls to agencies in New York. And so this is also what I speak out about in the modeling industry, is this sex trafficking ring that goes on within the modeling industry. And we know Jean-Luc Brunel took his life in jail the same way Jeffrey allegedly took his life. And he was bringing loads of Eastern European models to the U.S., working in New York. And Jeffrey also had an apartment in the Upper East Side. I've seen the apartment. I had a girlfriend that stayed there that had all these Eastern European girls living there, and they were working as models. And she was one of them. And I'm not sure how he did that, but he had a way of getting these visas. So they would bring these girls over, and they would have a visa, which is huge, because most of them, you have to do 60 pages of tear sheets in magazines all around the world before you can work. But he was getting visas easily. And these girls were living in New York, having a great life, but they were under the control of Epstein and Jean-Luc Brunel. And I think a couple other agencies that I've heard of. I was with Ford Models, and a lot was going on with Ford Models as well. I think Faith Cates at Next Models, Jean Casablanca at Elite, Gerard Marie. There was quite a few of them that I can only say these names because I know for a fact, because I've seen things, documents and emails and things like that. So I know that I'm not saying they're guilty. I'm just saying they were young girls that were brought over on these visas. They were brought to work here, and a lot of them ended up on Epstein Island or in Epstein's, I don't want to say ring, because I'm not sure, but they were in his orbit, so to speak.
So how do you think he was getting those visas expedited that way?
Well, you're talking about Jeffrey here. He can do anything.
Right.
That's how Jeffrey was able to keep so many young, beautiful women in New York in his orbit, was because he always did things for them, big things.
Yeah, and what I mean by that is he can do anything, but the question is, why can he do anything?
Why can't he?
Why can he? Like, what's the reason behind his ability to kind of pull rabbits out of hats that way? Because that's a very non-standard thing. You don't just like, obviously he has power. I think we're all very aware of that. But the question becomes,
well, how deep does it go? Really?
Exactly right.
Yeah. How far does it extend? Yeah. Yeah. You have to have a lot of people enabling him and deeply invested in keeping this going.
And you mentioned a couple things there. Number one, Jean-Luc Brunel. I don't know how. I mean, his if you keep up with the story, his name is a part of it. And but did you ever cross paths with him or?
Well, actually, I mean, yes, but just in like groups and outings and things like that, or dinner parties and stuff. He was around. I don't have a story with him. I have friends that have stories with him. Jean-Luc Brunel was very different from Jeffrey. He owned a modeling agency. He was like a head of Karen's in Paris, and he was a very, very powerful agent in the 90s. And I'm not quite of the story of exactly why he lost that position and power there, but he was then had to do with sexual abuse. And then he opened up an agency in New York. And I believe Epstein funded that agency in New York. So he had an agency in Paris, and Jeffrey definitely went back and forth to Paris a lot. We know this. Had a place there too. And it all started in Paris. And then I think it shifted to New York. And the names that I mentioned in the modeling industry are all very, very powerful people in the industry. They ran the modeling industry. They were the biggest names and biggest agencies. And so Jean-Luc Brunel, Jeffrey had this mentor thing that he helped people. So he had this guise about him where people trusted him. Jean-Luc Brunel wasn't like that. He was known for being a nasty predator. He would just outright rape girls, right? So he was malicious and he had a horrible reputation, but he still had power. And so a lot of young girls would still want to be with that agency really bad. It wasn't like a Jean Casablanca who's charming and handsome and everybody wanted to be around him. He had the best reputation. All these other agents I spoke about had very good reputations, and everything was kind of hidden or underground or not really talked about. But Jean-Luc Brunel, he was horrible. Some of these French ones were pretty horrible, right? and it was known. I think Gerard Marie too. It was known that they were abusing women. There's a lot of supermodels with stories of these two men. So yeah, he had very deep ties with Epstein. And these are all documented, and you could just look this up. That people know that. So yeah, we're talking about the powerful agents in the modeling business. And because I started in Europe, I was well aware of what was going on with Jean-Luc Brunel even before I moved to New York years later.
So, I mean, we left off at the island, but I mean, before we move on from there, does anything did you see anything else that was strange? Or, you mentioned getting there and seeing the younger woman with the older man, which wasn't that out of the ordinary, but did anything else kind of pique your interest and over the course of the night or maybe in the morning, whatever?
No. Exactly what I explained is what happened. Yeah. It was just hanging out with the girls, the dinner, the massage, and then, waiting for the boat. It was a pretty quick night. Yeah.
And I guess the reason I ask is obviously you're plugged into the Survivor Network too now. And I think there's just reports of just very strange things happening on that island. And, you see things like that weird temple thing that he had at the corner of it. And I guess just from talking to some of the other survivors and that sort of thing, what kind of stuff from an insider's perspective, actually went on there? Yeah.
So if we're skipping forward, I didn't find out all of this stuff until 2020, right? So this is 20 years later, 15 to 20 years later. So yes, I know a lot now, but I didn't know back then but I had heard as a model back then of girls going to the island. And I would hear that there were other men that they would meet there. Princes, I would hear a lot about, and other powerful people. Now, mind you, men that are in academia or tech or these types of men, a lot of times they don't really know their names or care to know their names, So that's a thing where when they spoke about it, it was always like these older men, but it wasn't like name, right? Because a lot of times they didn't know the name, didn't care to know the name, or maybe wanted to suppress what happened to them. They're not famous men, a lot of these. So whoever they saw on the island, it wasn't like we were tossing names around, So that's one thing they have where, they can breathe a little bit because it's not, a lot of times, you don't remember all these names or these faces clearly. Yeah, unfortunately. I mean, but I do know a lot of these men kind of looked alike. There were a lot of older men and,
Old white men.
Old white men and not that good looking.
Just call a spade here.
I know, a couple hairs on their head. It wasn't like they were like, Donald Trump like walking around where it's like, oh, I know who that is. I know who that is. This area is like charming, narcissistic. Like you remember those guys. Yeah, most of those guys weren't like that. So then when they would say these people, when we would talk about it, it wasn't like it was like name. It just wasn't, fortunately.
Yeah, and there's been some reporting around like Epstein, his funding when it comes to like science and like cutting edge research and technology and that sort of thing, which is kind of strange.
Mm-hmm. Oh, he was very much into that. He talked a lot with tech and science. Was like fascinated with like cloning and he definitely was the out of the box thinker. So a lot of times you're just like, what? And it was, always like fascinating, the stuff that he would talk about,
About like cloning himself and the technology and stuff? And you talk to him about this sort of thing?
Yeah, those are the kind of things that he would talk about. Yeah, he would, we're getting ahead.
That's okay.
Here, because I haven't gotten to how I saw him again.
Right, and we will, to be fair.
Okay.
Oh, well, trust me, we'll bring it back. I just like to branch off and have these little sidebars because they're interesting.
Oh yeah,
but trust me, I'll bring you back. That's my only job here. It's just to bring you back along. Yeah. But that is interesting. I just haven't heard any of the survivors talk about those sorts of conversations like that.
Oh yeah, a lot of them know about the stuff that he would talk about. Because he was kind of like a little kid in a way. He always had this little grin about him, and he loved talking about real things and things that he was interested in, and the stuff that was always fascinating. Right? It was always fascinating. Yeah.
It's pretty interesting. It's fascinating. I would say it's fascinating. Mm-hmm. So, okay. So yeah, well, let's keep going with the story then. And I guess, in the immediate, you kind of talk to us about the immediate aftermath where you go back to the room and you're staring at the ceiling and, presumably feeling used and confused. And, but I guess like when you get back to New York after that, how did that start to kind of manifest itself in your psyche? Like that's obviously the immediate feelings, but then, how do you start to feel about yourself and like rationalize what happened?
That's a really good question because I felt like I was a completely different person. Whoever Lisa was leading up to that was not the same Lisa that left that island. And I know that because I was just a different, I don't understand depression very well and drug addicts and stuff like that. But I got a taste into what that could have been like if I had maybe went down that way. I didn't, but I had a taste of it in the way where I think I felt like now I felt the shame and also the uncomfortableness of my body that I was kind of like now damaged, right? Where before I was like, felt like this more special and I had a lot to give someone in a relationship when I found that man one day. I was always looking for like a really good partner. And then after that, I felt like a little damaged. And so my behavior changed. I remember those months I started partying, You know, and I never, before, remember I told you before, I would be at Madonna parties and they would be doing cocaine on, you know, these platters and things. I'd be like, ew, you know, and I would always be like, oh, disgusting. But I wasn't like that anymore. Now all of a sudden I was like, oh, I'll try that. You know, and then I started hanging out at a lot of parties and wanting to just be part of the cool people and part of that crowd. And maybe it was like a fascination with now these types of people because I had a little taste of wealth and power. And I think I had a little bit of a fascination with it. But because I felt like now I'm abused. I was abused. And I had never been part of my plan was to be one of those that felt like I was like unworthy and full of shame. And I feel like a lot of that came up in me. I realize now, just because I've been through a lot of therapy, that was coming up because I felt it from childhood probably. And that fueled it back in me. I had lost like that power of being like this New York model and actress, and I was building a career and I felt good. I lost it for a little while. And so I know for those months I started partying and hanging out. I would do drugs and just be part of the scene. And it was good and it was fun because this is the early 2000s now in New York City where the clubs were lit. Right? And it's like the parties or hang out with Leo and like, you know, you're like all these rock stars. And I saw a lot, you know, and now I could justify it. Well, all those famous people are doing it. Like, why can I do it now? And, you know, I was just a different person, but it was kind of fun. But it was, it's not a healthy way to live, you know, when you're partying and you have to be up at 6 o'clock in the morning for photo shoots and things like that. So my career was kind of going a little bit like this because I know the agents were now getting pissed off at me. You know, I was being late for work and things. I think things shifted. And if they're watching now, they're probably like, oh, that's what happened to you back then. Because I know things changed with me for that period of time. So, and also the reason why is because I was hounded by Epstein's secretaries. I think he had 4 to 6 working in an office on the Upper East Side. They would hound me. They would call me almost every day. Jeffrey would like to see you. Jeffrey thinks you're amazing. Jeffrey thinks you're powerful. Jeffrey thought this about you on the island. Like, Jeffrey. And I'm like, what? Like, can you leave me alone? Stop. You know, because the last thing I wanted to do was ever go back and see that man who did those things to me. And I didn't like those things that he did to me. It didn't feel good. I had never seen stuff like that before. I had never been in those kind of situations. It was just fucking odd. Can I cuss? And I don't normally cuss.
Oh, yeah.
It's just when I get mad, I do. You know, and I just like I'm thinking about it from this time frame. And it's like, it just wasn't good. And I remember like my roommate at the time, she was like, why do they keep calling you? And I'm like, I don't know. I was just kind of scared. Like, why was he hounding me? And then finally he called me 4 months later. I think he was like, I'm not getting through to this girl. She's never going to come see me, but I've got to get this girl to come see me because she saw things on that island. I need this girl in my orbit. Like, you know, it doesn't work that way with Jeffrey Epstein. You're not able to go and meet with him and get away from him. You know, unless nothing happened, but something happened and I saw things. And I know that he was like not letting me get away. And so when he called me, I was like, oh, fuck. And I even remember where I was. I remember where I was standing. I was like after a casting. And I remember looking and I remember answering the 212 number and like, oh shit. But he's so brilliant. He's just so brilliant. Because he says to me, I remember what you said on the island, Lisa, what your big goal was and what your big dream was. And I know Katie Ford. She's a really good friend of mine. And I told her about you and she said she wants to meet you. And I remember being like, well, maybe he's not a bad guy. Maybe he feels bad about what he did. You know, I'm trying to rationalize it in my head. Like, well, this is a big thing. Why would he do this for me? So like, he just reeled me in because I was like, Katie wants to meet with me. Katie was the huge, big, daughter of Eileen and Jerry Ford. She was running the Ford modeling agency, this amazing, powerful agency down on Green Street in Soho, where I would just dream of going into. And so I have been working for that goal since I was 16 years old. So when Jeffrey said that to me, I was like, yes, I'll go. And so he was like, okay, gave me the information. Within, a short period of time, I was over there meeting with Katie Ford. I remember going into the building and being like, wow, this is so cool. I remember I ran into Brad Croning in the office. He was a supermodel. He was so gorgeous. And I was like my model crush at the time. I was like, oh my gosh, Brad. I was like eating, cereal in your face this morning, and he was like laughing and stuff. We had this like exchange because I was, looking at him in the fashion magazine eating the cereal. So it was so surreal. And I remember he was like, it was just funny because, and then I walk in and I go up to there and they're like, wow, that Katie's waiting for you. And just felt so good, and I think he set this all up for me, but it worked. And so, I met with Katie and she was like, I love Jeffrey. And I was just like, oh, wow, like people like her love him. Like, I was like, yeah, me too. And then we had this little thing going, and then I met the agents, and then I switched from my agency over to Ford Models. It was just a big deal for me. That's Jeffrey Epstein. Mm. If I can sum up anything to people watching, that is him. That is the brilliant mind of him. That's how he gets these women into, and I'm not talking about the underage ones in Florida that have to do with Ghislaine, and I'm talking about the women that were hundreds of us in New York City that were young, ambitious, beautiful models, actresses, career women, ended up being TV hosts, starting businesses through him, meeting their husbands through him. He had power. And so he made that happen to me. That was nothing for him, right? But that was everything to me. And so that was a step up for me. And now, would I have probably achieved a lot in my life without him? Probably, because I was going in that direction. But he helped. So now I'm in with Katie Ford. And I thought I was special back then with Katie Ford, but little do I know now, they're just friends, good friends. And now Katie knows I'm from Jeffrey. Now I'm in Katie's circle. So now I'm getting invited out to these parties and charity events with her and her people and her sexy hot husband, Andre Balaz, and he knows everybody, I think he's with Uma Thurman now or whatever, but, and, it just was this world where it was like, oh, wow, I'm in this world now, not Jeffrey's world. I'm in this fashion world. And I remember she invited me pretty close after that to an event, very close, not many people at this event, but it was high end. A lot of high rollers were there. And Bon Jovi was singing. And I'm a girl from the 80s. And I loved watching John Bon Jovi literally was singing As Close As You Are to Me. And I remember being like, oh, this is the life. This is great. I just sat there and watched him and he was like singing to me. And so, all these surreal things were happening, and I just was really enjoying this kind of lifestyle. And I thought I was safe at this point because now I'm here. But little did I know the fact that Jeffrey did that for me. Now he's calling me saying, well, come see me. Mm. And I didn't want to see him, but now he did something for me that was huge. And I'm like, he's a good guy now. Now he's not going to do what he did to me. That was just an island thing maybe. And maybe he's not going to touch me. And, maybe he's not going to want a massage. And maybe I can handle this. And I did not want to go see him, but unfortunately, that's what happened is I went to go see him at his Upper East Side house. And I remember going into that big door, beautiful, the biggest mansion in the Upper East Side. I mean, I think in all of New York City. It's a very powerful house. And then, housekeeper lets you in and you walk into this amazing house and it's like, wow. And then you go upstairs into his beautiful office. And then, of course, typical Jeffrey makes you feel super comfortable. And just another great conversation now about my goals and everything I want in life. And And then you could see in his room, this room, him with like princes and royalty and presidents and powerful people. And it's like, yeah, he wants you to see all that. You know, I'm important. And he just, again, would ask these really great questions and make you think outside the box. And he did this wonderful thing for you. Well, you're a Ford model now. This is a really big deal and stuff. And, you know, trying to just get me to feel really, really comfortable again. And so he did. He made me feel very comfortable. And from there, he didn't abuse me that day, but there he would call me after and go to like a charity event. I remember one was for like Michael J. Fox Foundation. I was sitting next to like Michelle Pfeiffer, and you know, I remember seeing her. Wow, she's so gorgeous. And no, just setting up these things and bringing me to dinners. And sometimes he would call me to bring like my model girlfriends to to his house in his private library. And sometimes we would go in and we would meet with a bunch of old men. I couldn't tell you their names really. I mean, sometimes I could identify them, but you know, it was just these men that were older that were like, why are we here? Kind of thing. And I had met Ghislaine Maxwell at one of those things. So I would start going to these things with him sometimes. And sometimes he would invite a bunch of girls like to the Nutcracker at Christmas time. One of the girls just showed me a picture of us from the Nutcracker. I was like, that I got to meet in DC. So like these things are now we're starting to talk a little bit and seeing his lifestyle. And, but during that time, everyone spoke highly about Jeffrey. It was always like, I love Jeffrey. He's great. Wow. He's brilliant. Everyone talked really highly about him. So it felt really safe. But then there were some times where he would want me to do a massage. And so he trickled these things in where I would have this wonderful meeting with him and feel like, okay, I'm going home. Bye. It was great. It was so great talking to you, and like want to leave. And he'd be like, I think I need a massage today. And so then that would start happening. And I didn't know at the time. The girls would talk a little bit, but most people during that time wouldn't say anything bad about Jeffrey. Remember, if it's abuse, you don't really talk about it. This is a thing with serial predators that have lots of, you know, he's seeing 6 to 8 girls a day. You're not really talking about it, but you'll talk about maybe the good things he did for you. That would come up. But when it was like the abuse stuff, it would be like, oh yeah, Jeffrey needs creepy massages. You know, it was kind of like, oh yeah, does he do a creepy massage with you? Like we wouldn't say like, is he taking out a vibrator? Is he hurting you? Is he pinching your nipples? Is he doing these things? Is he making you cry when you leave? Like, are you drinking or suppressing this stuff? Like, are you acting out? Are you getting therapy? We didn't talk like that, like we do now. Like young girls do now. But during that time, we kind of wanted to talk about it. But you can't really bring it up because you're so kind of ashamed of what you did because you think you're the only one it's happening to. You think you're that darn special that Jeffrey's maybe only doing it with me, and maybe he's not doing it with them, and maybe he's just doing, oh, they're saying it's a creepy massage. Maybe they're just doing a massage. I was thinking that he was doing those things with me sometimes, and maybe I was the only one. So it was just very confusing for me during those years. It was just confusing because I just felt like he's a good guy and he's helping me. Because now I'm going to explain to you what trafficking is, because we are all talking about trafficking now. And someone just said, oh, well, there's no evidence that these girls were trafficked. Well, I don't know what you're thinking trafficking is, but I'm going to give you a couple examples in Jeffrey Epstein's world of what trafficking looks like. I'll use my experiences and what I know of other girls, and some are a lot worse than mine. But you have to understand with Jeffrey, and what most people focus on is there were all these younger girls that were 14 to 17 and older also in Florida. And in Florida, Ghislaine and other young girls, because that's how he set everything up, is you meet the young girls and the young girls bring other young girls. Or Ghislaine or other women like her that were older would bring young girls. So we know Ghislaine is in jail for this. And she should be. But his way of bringing in other girls was a genius plan, was other girls. He made those girls bring in other young girls. And the more they did, a lot of these girls came from homes that were a lot of abuse already, or they had already been abused, and he chose them like that. He knew this about them. And they needed money, or, some of them were poor. They didn't have anything. And so going to give this creepy man a massage, they did not want to do it. He knows they don't. He knows a young girl does not want to do it. But they sometimes felt like, oh, I have an opportunity to maybe make some money, so I'll just do it, not knowing the implications and how that is going to affect your life. It's bad how it affects a young girl's life. But I think in Jeffrey's twisted mind, he's always like, oh, well, I'm giving you this money. I'm helping you out. And so in their mind sometimes was like, he did help me out. He helped out my mother, and he gave us money. So sometimes they were twisted in their minds of confusion around mentor, helper, abuser. So I'm just explaining the difference of now why you see these powerful women today speaking out and why it takes so much time to understand when you're confused and you're groomed and manipulated by a master manipulator and predator. So Jeffrey in Florida, younger girls, was doing some things that were exactly the same as the older girl. I mean, when I say older, we're 18 to 24 here. So we're not older. He kept you under 25 because he knows the brain didn't develop until you're 25, 26. So he knew that it had to be under 25, right? Wasn't going to get away with it as easily with someone 27, okay? And I've heard him say that. If I had a friend who was like, 27 is too old. And I always be like, why is she too old? Maybe he just liked younger girls, but it was the reason. So I'm just breaking it down. Younger girls, older girls. And older girls are these younger, like ambitious. They were always intelligent. These are the women that he liked to have around him. He did like these types of girls. And they always were a certain type. And he knew that these types are what these men liked. I don't know, and I can't really speak so much about the younger girls and their trafficking. I only can speak about what I do know is obviously they were brought to the island and they were made to have sex with other men. Not all of them, because Jeffrey had a tier. So the tier I'm going to explain as well is all these girls are coming in, he's abusing them. He takes his time to abuse them because there's a lot of them. He takes their time. And as he gets a trust, and he really gets the trust into you with a certain girl, then from there he can invite you to the island or to parties, events. And then the trafficking happens where it's not directly, and I know this for a fact, that he said, go in that room with that man. And they would go in that room with that man and have sex with that man and then leave. There wasn't a date. There wasn't any type of romance. It was go have sex with that man. So I am saying this because I know what happened. That's like a more of a harsher of going through this tier and then having you do being trafficked to this other man. So, but I'm going to explain what trafficking is when people in the media today are like, I don't know if they were trafficked. Like, oh, what is trafficking? I don't know if there was any ring going on here. Let me just explain what was going on. So let's say I was at this charity event, and this event I told you about that I see people that I know and trust there, like from the modeling agencies and actors and other models and things. And Jeffrey is usually there, but he's not a playboy type. Let's get this straight. He's not a Hugh Hefner. So he's not always around with a bunch of girls around him. He's usually on the side somewhere. And he'll make an appearance here and there to do something, but he's usually away. So you're not having a lot of communication with Jeffrey out in public. But he might be like, come over here, and I want you to meet somebody, and you'll meet someone and briefly talk to them. And there's an exchange, pretty innocent, just getting to know you a little bit. And so that's the first level of like getting to know, another older gentleman that's at this event. And then everything's fine. You go home. And then a couple days later, you're called. And this gentleman maybe wants to take you to dinner, or there's another dinner that's going on and he wants you to show up. So that's how the girls get from home to another event. And it's a specific, strategic relationship because this man has chosen the girl, wants to meet the girl, but does not know that she's been chosen and it's been worked on between this man and Jeffrey. She just thinks, oh, you're chosen because whatever that man is interested in, he knows you're interested in. So it could be like a hosting position at a big TV studio or a newscaster. She has interest in that, or he's not going to choose her, right? He wouldn't choose me because I want a model and actress. I'm not the right one. Maybe a girl who wants to be in the art world, he's not going to choose her. So it's specific. So this opportunity is an opportunity for her. Of course, Jeffrey, I'll go meet with him. She goes and meets with him, and maybe there's a dinner, maybe there's a flat out abuse, but usually there's a dinner or it works into some way of an abuse that happens. So the goal is always to get the right girl to the right guy for sex. Or hopefully the feeling from the man that this young girl wants to have sex. It doesn't always have to be, but I believe with most men, the end goal is probably some type of sexual activity. So, but that's a trafficking that the girl doesn't know she's being trafficked, right? Shit. And you probably haven't thought of that.
No.
But that's the reason why. Like, you bring in these girls, they go to these events, you meet these men, but you don't really know how the next step happens. And it's because, I mean, these are hundreds of girls to choose from that are ambitious, and you have to play on an ambition. You have to play on an ambitious girl. Because if you're not ambitious, how the heck are you going to get her to say, okay, yeah, I'll go meet with him, Jeffrey? That sounds awesome. What a wonderful opportunity. That would be amazing. It's like this thing in you that says, wow, like with the Katie Ford thing, like amazing. So of course you're going to go meet with this person, right? You have to build a level of trust. So that's one way that I know happened a lot. Another way I can use my experience was I was an actress. I went to NYU for a couple years. I did tons of acting classes. Like, I was like, ultimate dream was to become an actress. And I was working my way up. I would do 10 to 12 TV commercials a year, which is big. I was like the TV commercial queen. I was on the TV all the time. So I was getting there. So if he says to someone, I'm going to send Lisa Phillips in, trust me, I can handle it. He's not going to send just some like hot chick. He's strategic. So of course, Jeffrey's like, I have a great friend who's out in LA. And obviously it's not just some like pretending to be a director who just wants to sleep with girls. This is the biggest directors in the world, right? So he'll call you up and say, so-and-so wants to meet with you. There's an audition for this movie. So it's specific. So it's real. And so he books the flight for you. I mean, he doesn't, but the girls in the office book the flight for you, sends you, and I only know this later, 9 other girls, but at the time I think I'm all special. I'm flying to Los Angeles to go meet with a big TV director. Sorry, I say TV. A big movie director. And there's an actual audition for an actual movie that's happening. So this isn't fake shit. This is the real deal. Why wouldn't I go? Right? Because that's how real world happens. The real world happens if you're like, hey, Lisa, my friend's directing a movie. Big movie, I can IMDb him. Big movie, real movie happening. I'm going to go if you send me. That happens all the time. Jeffrey, it's always real situations. So I'm using an example because this happened to me. So I go on a plane. Now you're trafficking me because you have organized me to get in an airplane and travel across the United States. I show up in LA, I'm excited, and I'm gonna go meet with this huge movie director. And I go meet with him. And from there, I'll give you a couple scenarios, is that you have an actual audition. Maybe in that audition there's some flirting going on, maybe not. Or there's a dinner that happens later on. You're always invited to a dinner, where you meet him or maybe some of his other friends. And those other friends know this is an Epstein girl. So they're all in cahoots with each other. So usually you can be invited to like a dinner or a party. And you think you're just being invited to like Hollywood party. And it's more strategic than that. So you go to these things and at some point you're going to be abused because he knows you're brought by Epstein. So it's certain girls are sent there. Now, I found out 15 years later that I talked to 9 other girls that was sent to the same director. Why were 10 of us sent from Jeffrey Epstein across the country to the same director, who was pretty well known, for being a sleazebag? But he doesn't have any, cases against him. No one's ever gone up against him, and I wouldn't.
To this day?
To this day that I know of, yeah. I just don't do that. My podcast and being there for survivors and giving them a voice, it's a healing process for us. I'm not in this to go after your money and go after these directors and try to bring down powerful people. It's going to be pretty tough. One thing is getting all 10 girls to get together and bring them down. It's just, we have lives, we have kids, we want to move on. And so lucky you guys, you got away with a lot of crazy things. And they know most of them are not going to be held accountable. And we as survivors know most likely they're not going to be held accountable. But I'm just trying to explain what trafficking really is when it comes to Epstein. And I don't know, do you want to call that trafficking for me? I don't.
First of all, the definition of trafficking is by force, fraud, or coercion. Coercion. Mm-hmm. So it's trafficking, but I think that you're just kind of blowing my mind right now, just to be completely frank with you. The way you're explaining this is just a way that I've never heard it explained before. And just a couple things that you said, just again about number one, the strategic nature, right? He's got tentacles in every arm of every industry that an ambitious young girl might want to be a part of. Mm-hmm. And he's pre-selecting those girls based on the recipient, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And you also mentioned that those people knew that they were an Epstein girl. So the way I think of it is again, that's another pre-selection to the point where, okay, these girls, they kind of know the deal, right? They maybe presumably have even been abused by Jeffrey before or by somebody else before, and they're not going to talk. Mm-hmm. And this is your big dream. Mm-hmm. He's gotten his hooks into you by asking you these questions. Now he has this leverage to hold right over you. And it's hey, here's this world that you've been working a decade for. Mm-hmm. And I'll pull back the curtain a little bit and let you look in. Are you sure you don't want to go inside? Mm-hmm. How the fuck can you blame a 20-something-year-old for walking into that room?
Well, I don't think most people would be able to say no. I just don't believe it if you're ambitious. Like I said, if you don't have a goal, it's hard to say. If you don't have a goal, it's easy to say, oh, I wouldn't do that. What are you thinking? Or I've heard this from a lot of women. I'm so strong. I would say no and run away. Yeah, from sitting on your couch. Yeah, I'm sure you would. But when you have an ambition and someone says, hey, I can help you get there, why would you say no? You don't think that someone is going to set you up. I had no clue that was happening. When I went there for that audition, I just thought I was going for an audition because it was a real audition, And if I'm right for the part, I would have gotten it. That guy ended up giving me a little part. I wonder why. I don't know. I wonder. And it's so funny because when I would come back, Jeffrey always wanted to know so many details about what happened. He would always say things like, so what was it like? What was he like? What questions did he ask you? What did you say? How did you dress? Did you give him a little flirt? And I would say, he wanted to have sex with me. Well, why didn't you? You could have gotten the part. Why didn't you? And I'm, what do you mean, why would I? It was always this thing huh? Why would I do that? And he's testing me out to see how far I go. Yeah. And even one time he was like, you were his favorite. He said you were, and I was surprised. You were his favorite. And I'm thinking, his favorite out of how many? So I always had these questions, and but I never knew what the frig he was talking about until now. I know now. But back then I didn't really know what he was talking about, but it all makes sense.
Yeah, he's normalizing it.
Yeah, he is normalizing it. And something that you did say, you said that he has his tentacles in all these people, and that they all know that they're probably an Epstein girl. Yeah, because most of them are setting it up straight. But I do have to say that these people that are powerful or have powerful positions, most of the time they have someone who sets things up for them. So I do know that, especially the bigger celebrities, that I have met is usually a person that's working for them that has the connection with probably the secretaries. It's not always between Jeffrey and the person. I just have to say that only because a few years ago, I reached out to one of the men that I had met through Jeffrey, who had actually never done he never abused me. But I had met him on an audition in Los Angeles. And this man had taken his life. And I'd heard that he was suicidal, and I had known that he was going through some really bad problems. And I was at an event where he was at too, and I had pulled him aside and I had just said, "Are you aware at all that the times that I saw you in Los Angeles, that the girls that were sent to you in those parties were from Epstein?" And he said no. He said absolutely not. He said, "But I never organized those parties. I had a guy that was, organized those things for me and had the girls that would show up, because a lot of parties, beautiful girls always showed up. I mean, that's normal." So I can see that he got that. But I had told him, I said, those were Epstein's girls that were there. I know that because I had gone to one of those parties. And I know I've spoken to those girls that were at those parties. We were sent by Epstein to that party. And I do know that some girls were abused. I wasn't abused. And if I had been abused by that guy, I probably would never have walked up to him. But I just wanted to talk to him. He also was a good guy. I always remembered him as a good guy. But that guy committed suicide not shortly after that. I don't know if it was related or not, but I was just like, look at the lives this man is affecting. There has to be some type of connection to why there are some men in that orbit who have taken their lives. Because I don't think a lot of men, unless they're just a sadistic predator like Jeffrey, feel good about now knowing that a lot of these girls that showed up at your parties were sent by Epstein and didn't want to be there for that reason. We were thinking, and a lot of these women that were the New York girls or LA or whatever, models and actresses, and a lot of these women are on TV today. There is over 40 that I know personally that have been introduced to their husbands from Jeffrey and hold high positions in Hollywood or the entertainment world because of Jeffrey's introductions. And they won't say anything, obviously, for obvious reasons. They won't say anything, and they don't have to. And I understand why a lot of them don't. I can get into why I did, but sometimes I question that. I'm like, why did I take on this whole role? Because it hasn't been easy to do this whole, to speak out and do all this stuff. But I'm so proud of myself for doing it now. Now that I have the podcast, now that I spoke out at Congress, like now I know because of the thousands of messages I get and how it's affecting not just women, but men out there. So I just want to preface that as saying that I know a lot of these men were in cahoots with Jeffrey and part of this sex trafficking ring. I know there's a sex trafficking ring. JP Morgan funded it and paid out over $200 million to survivors for a sex trafficking ring. There were emails that, people have seen, let's just say, from these people, powerful people, from Jeffrey Epstein to them, sending girls back and forth. So we are aware as survivors what's going on. But I just have to preface this saying, not always, that there are some men that were probably in his orbit that found him fascinating and a genius and special, wanted to be around him because he was powerful, and he was pretty amazing to be around, okay? Doesn't mean just because they were in a picture with him, just because they were on the island for a party, doesn't mean that girls were sent to them, hooked up between your people, that they're guilty of abusing these women. There were a lot of men, and I know this, that were around that did not abuse women, that maybe just liked them being around. And Jeffrey was like, hey, I'm special. I've got these girls, they're gorgeous. I'm sending them to you. They weren't all abused. There were certain men who did abuse, yes. But there were men also, I think because I'm a boy mom. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do know what you mean.
I'm a boy mom. And I know that there are good men out there who just want to be around the wealthy, powerful people. And a lot of women do too. It's very magnetic to be in this world. That's why there's a lot of people who have been abused in this world, and they're still in the world. They're like, I've been abused as a fashion model, but you're still in it. I've been abused as an actress. You're still in it. I mean, people always say, like, why are you still in it? Because we love the business. We love it. Doesn't mean just because someone took advantage of us that we have to now go and be, an architect and find a different path in life. No, we have an ambition in life. We want to do this. I'm still in entertainment because at 13 years old, I knew I was always going to be in the entertainment world. And there has been so many wonderful people. Oh my God. After I was divorced and pregnant, 2 children under 4 and pregnant, I leaned on a lot of these people in the modeling and entertainment industry to help me, to help build my business quickly, like this. If I didn't have those relationships, I don't know where I would be today. It's not easy to build things on your own without relationships and connections. So what Jeffrey Epstein was doing, he had a sadistic, predatory thing and maybe other ties with other networks to bring this to fruition. He was feeding off of it, but there was many other people that were feeding off of it, and I don't know the reasons why. It goes pretty dark and it goes pretty deep. But there were also other people that were involved or went to these parties and other women that are pretty darn innocent too. And yeah, I still feel that way because I still feel like in my journey with Epstein and what I found out, if I had never found out, I would have just thought, oh, creepy things happened. Why did that happen? Why did that person, why I would have been so confused about it if nothing had ever come about after 2019. I would never have known. People need to understand that. Like, I did not know what was going on back then, but woo, in the last 6 years, are we connecting some dots here?
Yeah, and I'm glad that it was worth it to come out and tell your story. And I think that what it is like you're helping people now. You're helping people that are listening to your story. You're helping people when you have other people on your podcast and you give them a platform to tell theirs. And it's, I can't imagine it's been easy. But I'm glad you did, and I'm glad we're sitting here today, and I'm glad you've been able to do what you've done and help the people that you've helped and will continue to. I think it's awesome, and I think it's also, it just speaks to, I'm glad you called out the fact that just because someone was around Epstein doesn't necessarily mean that they were complicit or, have done things like he did and that sort of thing. It just makes you non-biased to say that. So I appreciate you calling that out. God, you said so many things that were so interesting to me. Again, the one thing that really is blowing my mind is like thinking about the way he trafficked the survivors to other men. It's like theater. But it's real. But the chess pieces are real. Like, that is fucking crazy to me. I don't know why. And again, you're painting a really good picture. So I'm just conceptualizing it in a way that I hadn't prior. But again, the part's real. The movie director's real. The end state is like, yeah, I'm passing you off to this person for whatever I'm doing it for, me being Epstein. But the moving parts are real, which is nuts.
Yeah. It is fascinating. It really is when you start. That's why everyone's fascinated with the story. That's why it's been going on for so long, because there are so many moving parts. And there's people that are just holding on to the real parts, the real stuff. I mean, it's so easy to connect the dots if you really want to. But people don't want to. They really don't want to, because it's probably a lot to handle. It's probably a lot. Because just from what I've seen and understanding just from my story is different from a lot of my friends who experienced stuff that was maybe a little darker, So, I do have friends that will never speak out. And some of them who've seen, really bad things or they were really powerful people, they don't want to speak out. They want to kind of let it go, like, stop bothering me. I want to move on. I don't want to take on those people. That's what they're thinking, I mean, it's the whole reason why I spoke out in 2019. The whole reason why was because Virginia Giuffre, when she spoke out, I was like, oh, she's telling the truth. I know she was telling the truth because I've spoken to her after that. And I was like, were you the one on the island? Were you the one on the island that I met in 2000? You know, because you look like her, you know, so-and-so was there. I just want to be able to, you know, support your story. I would love to support your story, you know, and because I know what you are saying is true. Because I had a girlfriend who looked like Virginia, who was the one who actually broke things open for me. She's the one who was like, come see me right now. I need to talk to you right now. And I went to go see her. And this girl was like from Minneapolis, came from a wealthy family in the art world, beautiful girl. I know Jeffrey adored her. I guess Jeffrey can adore someone. I know he really liked this girl. And so she had a different relationship with him, like some of the blondes did. You know, she would travel with him. She'd been to the island, been to Paris, where her family would go to Paris a lot. And so she had a different relationship with him. And she was just like, you don't know who Jeffrey is. And I'm like, what are you talking about right now? Like, what are you talking about? She's like, you don't know who this man is. That was the first time I ever heard something that was like concrete. Lisa, this man is not a good guy. And she said, you know, he just made me in his Upper East Side house go into a room and have sex with someone. And she said who he was. And I was like, what? What do you mean he made you? No. He said, do that now. Go do it now. Made me go do it. And I was just like, huh? Just like, what are you talking about? He made you? Because that was different from my experiences. Mine were very subtle. You know, didn't find out 15 years later until I connected the dots. Now hers was, you're going to go do that now. And she had to go do that. And she went and did it, which was gross. It was like this older guy who just sex. It wasn't like any romance or any, nothing leading up to anything. It's just like go in a room and have sex with a man. That was on a whole nother level of like, who the fuck is this man? Like that was scary to us because it was a whole nother level of like, this isn't normal. And she was unbelievably shaken and upset and crying. This wasn't a good experience for her, you know, like it would be, but you know, it was terrible. And I knew the name. And I remember thinking, oh, I know that person. He was on the island. So I was just like, so everything was connecting for me. And this is the whole reason why I started speaking out, because I had these connections going on. Jeffrey kept me close because he knows I'm no idiot. You know, I saw things. This was my best friend. Things are going on. And now, this is why he's keeping me close. And by keeping you close is why he does these things kind of to traffic you. Like he does these things to be like, you know, so you be quiet. Yeah, so there was a couple things where I was starting to think where something was a little off, but I didn't know for sure. When she said that to me, that was the first time when I realized like something maybe deeper or darker was going on. That being a big deal to her, she didn't want anything to do with him after that. And I had remembered shortly before that, Jeffrey had called me and he had said, like, I want you to go meet with this musician who was an older musician. And I was like, why would I go meet with him? And he was like, oh, Ghislaine is going to be there. And I had met Ghislaine a few times, but more recently, I had a chance to talk to her at one of those library parties in his house. And you know, she had lived in Oxford and so had I. So I don't know, we had this little thing back and forth. So I was kind of thought it was weird that she would invite me and why he would ask me to go meet with this musician. And I didn't go. But I remember that was also for me a point where I was like, why is he asking me to do that? Oh, and that was the first time I said to him, what is this for? Like, what do you want me to do something with him? And that was the first time he said, oh yeah, why not? Or yes. I can't remember exactly what he said, but it was more like, yeah. And I was thinking, okay, something's off with this guy. Because now he was getting more bold about things. And he was never like that before. And the Vanity Fair article came out where he took Clinton and Tucker and Spacey with him on that. And I was actually in South Africa during that time that he was there. So I don't know. As soon as I got back, he kept saying, is Vanity Fair calling you? Or people calling you? He was so paranoid about people calling me. And I kept saying, I didn't say anything. I haven't said anything. And I mean, that was right. I would never have, I mean, that was the truth. I would have never have said anything if anyone had asked me back then. I just would never have said anything. So he was always checking with me to make sure, like, are you saying anything? Are you speaking to the press? So I don't know. There was all this weird stuff that was going around. Some talk about Jeffrey kind of not being who we think he was. And so when my girlfriend said that, I was just like, what is going on here? So my last time that I went to go see Jeffrey, I went to go see him just to kind of call him out, like what's going on, a few things that I've seen and that, you know, what happened to my friend. I was actually kind of sticking up for her. And he had said to me, well, you know, Lisa, I like to have things on people. So I had always remembered that because like, oh, he likes to have things on people. Is that why you record everything? Is that why all these cameras? I could see all the cameras everywhere. That didn't make sense to me till obviously now it makes sense to me, but it didn't really make sense to me then. I just thought this is just not a normal situation. It's odd. It's creepy. I just remember shortly after that, there was an exchange between Jeffrey and I at that point that went dark. I don't really talk about it. It was kind of the last exchange with him that frightened me. That was a different situation I'd ever seen with Jeffrey. It was darker. He was different. And that was the first time I felt scared. She was scared. I started to reach out to some other friends that knew him. And things are just changing with Jeffrey. I think he was being exposed. And I'm not quite sure what was going on behind the scenes, but it wasn't good wherever it was going. And I was just freaked out. And that was in 2004, early 2004. And I remember it was within a month. I had packed up my bags. I was kind of already ready to make the transition from New York to LA, but that made it happen very quickly. And so I didn't tell him I left. I just packed up my stuff and I left. And the last call that I got from him was he didn't understand why I'd left. I think he was like kind of on to me. The other girl that I'm talking about stopped talking to him too. And it was just a really uncomfortable thing. And I remember right after that call, maybe like within a couple days, the Ford modeling agency called me and said, you know, that I was requested for the Victoria's Secret casting. And during those years, 2004, Victoria's Secret was huge. It was like the job that you wanted as a model. And I knew Jeffrey had ties to Victoria's Secret. And so I was like scared to death. And I said, oh, I don't want to go. And they're like, what are you talking about? What do you mean you don't want to go? Like, this is huge. And I was just like, I don't want to go to that casting. The casting was in New York. I'd have to go back to New York. And I knew that he had made a phone call. I just know, because that's what he does, is keeps you kind of close. And just to say, oh, I'm going to do this for you, so stay quiet, or I'm going to do this for you, you can't leave, or I'm going to do this for you, just keep you in my... And I just was like, I'm out. And so when I moved across country, I didn't go for that casting. You know, and it would have been a really big thing for me. And I was just like, well, I don't need you, and I don't want this, and I didn't do it. And sometimes I regret it because I'm like, it was Victoria's Secret, it would have been like probably a big deal. But I just thought maybe he had ties to that. So I was just like, I'm not getting reeled back in. It was going on 4 years. So, and I could see it was getting dark.
So, and again, you said it's not something you typically talk about. So I don't want to, again, I don't want you to go anywhere you're not comfortable with. But I guess my question was like, was it something that he said, or was it just a feeling that you got from him that something had shifted, or what can you describe kind of like, was it a feeling, or was it something you said, or?
Well, my energy was probably different, right? I had never, ever said anything to him that was pushback. The last phone call was pushback for me. Asking him questions, I never interrogated him or asked him questions ever. I would never do that. But I was just at the point like, what's going on? Why did you make my friend do that? He didn't like that. He just didn't like me saying those kinds of things, So when he said, I would like to have things on you, I like to have things on people, I was just like, what? Like, what's going on here? So, I mean, I went back and told my friends, like, he said he wants to have things on people. It was like a big thing. He wants to have things on people, you know, like he's recording things, like what's going on? We were talking. So his energy was so different with me. He wasn't the same guy at all. The guy that people talk about now, like the young girls who saw some of this darker stuff, I saw it that day. And so, no, it wasn't just, like he did something to me that day. And that was kind of to shut me up or silence me or make me scared. I don't know what it was, but it was very different from before. And so after that day, I never saw him again after that. It was only one other phone call, you know, of when I had actually moved. And then the phone call from the agency from New York. And then after that, once I said no, he started getting really paranoid and getting in a lot of trouble after that. So I think his focus went elsewhere. But he was losing control of a lot of girls that were kind of figuring things out. The press was figuring things out. There was articles coming out. And so he was extremely paranoid at that time.
Yeah, I guess he was probably trying to do damage control and assess like how you thought about the situation, because to your point, like you had thought about him and, you know, as the person that you sat down with Katie Ford and she's like, yeah, I love Jeffrey. And you're like, oh, well, maybe it's just me. And then when the media starts to turn the tide a little bit and you're a loose end, maybe he makes an implicit threat. But I don't want to. There's an article about this encounter involving you. Obviously, that kind of spells it out, and I don't want to make you like go into saying names and stuff like that.
Right.
It's out there, but I guess a part of that was, like you said, he had mentioned to you that he likes to have things on people, and I believe the article states that it wasn't the first time that he had mentioned that to you. He had said that to you before?
I mean, not in those words, no. But when I used to go to his office and sit there with him, when I used to have these little mentor sessions, and we would talk about business or things I wanted to do, he was very cheeky about having conversations in front of me and being like, oh, that's, you know, the richest man in the world, or that's, you know, little things to say, oh, let me tell you about this guy, you know, and tell me a secret. You know, stuff like that. He was very much like liked telling secrets about other powerful people. So it was just his thing about him. And, you know, that's all he focused on was power and sex. I mean, I've asked him before, you know, like, why do you do all this? And he basically said, because of pussy. You know, and I wasn't really used to hearing that word. You know what I mean? I don't know. I still remember when he said it, I was like, ew, you know? And it was just like, that's why? That's all? Yeah, that's basically, I was like, ugh. I just remember being like grossed out about him a few times. He had told me just some weird stuff. So he was always like trying to tell you these little things about his life. Like once he told me that I used to do a lot of TV commercials for Turkey. So I used to do Turkish yogurt, and I would fly and I would do these commercials and stuff. And so I was talking to him about this commercial I was doing, and he was like, oh yeah, I just went to Turkey, and you won't believe what happened to me. You know, he has this little grin. He just thinks it's so funny, you know, and he was like, I went to one of those Turkish baths and they set it up for me, naming like these big names who set up this really special, sensual, sexual bath for him. And I was like, okay, you know, and he's like, yeah, they put me on a table and all these beautiful, curvy Turkish women came in and they had these big old bushes and they would suds it up. And he said all of them were like dancing around me and sudsing me. I remember thinking, are you kidding me right now? Like we just laughed about it. And I was thinking, this guy is so whacked out of his mind. Like he's just crazy, you know? And I was like, really? And he just got a tickle, like a kick out of it. Like it was just so funny. He was telling me about it anyway. I was just like, huh? I remember that about him because I've told that story after, you know, Jeffrey told me, like such a weirdo, you know? But then that was funny. But then he would say things that now you would know was really dark. He also told me that he went to, I believe it was Russia, but I know it was Eastern European. It could have been Czech or Bratislava. I don't know. I just remember like somewhere in there where he went there meeting with somebody really important. And he said he was in a car. They took him to this big truck, and the truck opened up, and there were all these Eastern European women that were naked inside. And he said, "Oh yeah, it was really sexy because you can see, you know how when you breathe out, the air comes out." He said you could see it from their pussies. And I remember being like, what? He thought it was funny. And I was like, why would there be naked girls in a truck? Naked girls in a truck? Naked young girls in a truck? Like in one of those, like, I don't know what they call it. What are those big trucks called?
Like a box truck or something?
Yeah, exactly. That's sad. Like,
and cold enough where you could see that heat. Jesus.
And yeah, those are things that he would say to me. And I would always be like what? Like,
what is that?
something was so wrong with him. Like something, like he was such a pervert. He was so perverted, you know, that, and people set this up for him. And he just didn't have any sense of, like, what are you doing? Like, you ever think about those girls and how they got in that truck? Why are they naked and it's freezing cold out just for you? It's almost like those people knew he would get a kick out of it. So they play around like that with women, you know?
Yeah, I do know. And I've heard people talk about it in a way that, like, again, at that level of wealth, it's like, let's just say you have a baseline that is fun to you, right? Like for the average man, let's say, like meeting a woman out, you know, at, I don't know, a coffee shop or a bar and getting her phone number and taking her out to dinner, like, and sure, eventually sleeping with her, whatever the case may be. That's like, that's a fun time. That's a good experience for both parties, right? Yeah. But you have people like him who do that for long enough, and eventually that doesn't satiate them anymore. And they want things that are worse and more sadistic and evil. And they say in a lot of cases, like, that's not where they start, but you get numb to these things. And especially people with this massive accumulation of wealth and power. Like, I just cannot conceptualize it any other way than, like, he just got off on destroying innocence. Yeah. Like, that has to be what it is. Yeah. It's just, there's just, what is worse than that? You know?
No. Destroying innocence. It's basically it. That power and that control. I don't think he was ever the type to take women on dates and wine and dine them. I just don't see that. I think he had a dark, perverted, you know, feeling about him before he was wealthy. Because usually wealth brings out the worst in you. There's a lot of people who are super wealthy that don't do things like that and hurt women. They just wouldn't think of doing stuff like that. You know, but he had, you know, the world was his playground. So anything perverse that's out there, and these are two different countries of perversion, of bringing you something that's going to be like what Jeffrey likes. It's almost like when you see the birthday book right now. The birthday book to me is exactly his world. See how everyone is like a little cheeky with the perversion? What they're saying, they knew exactly who Jeffrey Epstein was. That's why it's funny to them. You know, that's these stories I'm telling you. That's what he found was funny. That's what the birthday book is saying. Oh, you know, little drawings, and it's all like an underlying perversion.
And do you think that he kind of let you in, like you mentioned him being on the phone with the richest person in the world, and just letting you in on these little cheeky little moments? Like, I think that, you know, in that 2004 time frame, it's pretty easy to determine who the richest person in the world was. That's not my point. But, like, do you think that it was kind of this, I would imagine that's got to be part of the grooming process, where you are sort of like, you are letting someone in and sort of like elevating them, and it's at a peer level, and you think like, oh, it's me, like, you know what I mean? It's focused in on you and that sort of thing.
Yeah, it was almost like telling you a little secret, where it's like, oh yeah, this guy who just called me, he has in his marriage contract that he's allowed to sleep with his ex-girlfriend once a month. You know, like a little secret. Like, I'm not gonna tell anybody that, but he's like,
that's a real thing?
Oh yeah. That's what he would say. And I was like, almost like he just told me something to like feel like you're part of like something special, like you know things. And yeah, I do have to say any conversation with him was super fascinating. It was. And I'm just that type of person too. I feel like I have a high intelligence where I pick up on those things a little bit. I'm not like a bookworm, but the intelligence of thinking outside the box and other things that are happening, I felt like I was on his level. And I felt like, if this is even possible, that in a way he liked me in a way that I was like that and interested. I actually really do believe he liked being around young women who were intelligent. I don't know where or how bad his sadism goes or how bad he's tricking you just to groom you. Sometimes I think there has to be some part of him that's good because he was actually really helping people. Because you look at someone like P. Diddy, he wasn't helping anybody. He was really a monster, drugging people that didn't even know they were being drugged and like flat out, the stuff I've heard is just a way different type of perversion and abuse. I actually don't know which is worse. You know what I mean? But it was just a different type of thing, like a Bill Cosby, who's also a serial predator. He was drugging every single woman before he abused them. And I've talked to a lot of those survivors, and they can't even keep it together because they don't even know what happened to them while they were being abused. You know, and I've spoken to Larry Nassar survivors. He was also very much like Epstein, where he abused through digital abuse, which is, hands or tools and things like that. He wasn't also just having sex with everyone. He was also with young girls, just abusing them, in that small room. Like one has a massage, one has, a doctor doing, techniques, things like that. And both were trusted in their communities, and people would say, oh, he's great, we trust him. Well, we don't believe you because he's this incredible doctor and he's this incredible, powerful person, and sending gifts and grooming the parents. I mean, Jeffrey would send things to my parents' house. My parents didn't live that far from Zorro Ranch in New Mexico. So there were good parts of him. Oh, go to my house and ride horses when he wasn't there. Things like that. So he was also doing things. People have to understand he was doing a lot of things that he didn't have to do to kind of make you think that, oh, we're friends. He would always send every girl something. He didn't do it. His people did it. Something for Christmas. You would get a gift from him every Christmas. So you have to understand the grooming goes so far wide and vast and deep, and parents and people that you work with, everyone is involved. There were a lot of enablers, and there was a lot of grooming that was going on, that it wasn't just you.
It's layered.
Oh, super layered.
That is so interesting and I also that tells me that you've done the work, because you can call out the fact that he did do objective good for your life. But the fascinating thing about what you just said to me is like, okay, so yes, he gets you a job as a Ford model, right? He mentored you in some ways about life, about entrepreneurship, about like how to navigate the world. Like he gave you opportunities. Like he did this objective good for your life, but it was all under the guise. It was all in a manipulative, malevolent, not well-intentioned way. So like, again, going back to how you conceptualized it when you were thinking to yourself, like, is he a good guy? This is confusing to me. Like, after the years have gone by now, like, how do you reconcile the like duality of he did this good, but it was all for bad?
Well, that was the toughest part. When he died in 2019, I remember exactly where I was, and I remember feeling like someone really close to me had died. I just naturally just was like, started crying. And I remember my boyfriend at the time, my partner, we were living together, I remember him looking at me like, are you okay? And I just had this reaction of just crying. But it was more probably a release of finally, I can speak or I can tell my story because he's dead now. Before, if he was still alive today, I wouldn't even be sitting here right now. If he was alive today, I would never have spoken out. I don't think many people would. But the fact that he died, I was like, it was a release that came over me that I wasn't even expecting, because I wasn't really following it that closely. Because in my mind, I wanted kind of to keep him good. I didn't want to ever go there and think of the other stuff. I had suppressed it for so many years, never talked about it. And I didn't really feel comfortable with the man that I was with in that relationship at the time to talk to him about it. But I knew since he had died that there was something in me that always questioned what happened back then, and I didn't fully understand it. And I wanted to talk about it. I wanted to start talking about it. And so I remember clearly, it was a few days later, I was with that partner. We were driving. This is right after he died, August of 2019, September 2019, around then. And we were driving to the Tesla place for him to pick up his car. And I remember turning to him and being like, remember how, you saw how I reacted when Jeffrey Epstein, the news that he had died. And I said, I'd really like to tell you what happened to me. I haven't told anyone ever. And I have to talk about it. I just had this need. I mean, it was a deep need of just to start figuring things out with someone that I loved and cared about. And he said, put his hand on my face like that, I don't want to hear about it. And I remember in that moment being like, all that shame and all that unworthiness and came right back to me like, oh, I'm not good enough. Or why would someone who I love and I'm giving my life to, I'm expecting to be with for the rest of my life, didn't even want to listen to me. I mean, later he says it's because, I heard from him recently that it's because now I'm out there, it's because I thought he was a playboy and I didn't want to hear about your, being with this rich guy and all this stuff. Really? But I needed someone then. I needed someone to sit with me and be like, not judge me and just listen to what happened to you. As you know now, there's a lot. There's a lot. He could have held space for me. He could have known everything about me. But our relationship just obviously fell apart after that because now I'm with someone who, you don't love me. There's no way. Or at least that's not the love I need. So that's the turning point for me. That's where everything changed for me. Because in 2019 to 2020, now we're in the pandemic and I'm stuck with this man. But I have this need to reach out and talk to somebody. So I did. I started reaching out to other survivors that I saw in the news, Marika, Virginia, and these other women who are speaking out. And I was like, well, I can connect some dots with you because some of these women met Jeffrey through me. Some of them I saw on the island. And there were also experiences that I knew of friends that were made to have sex with other men. So I just started talking to them. Then Lifetime reached out for me to be in a documentary. But I was still, for a good year, only speaking out about what I saw from other people. I wasn't really ready to say it happened to me. That took me some time. I was still kind of confused. I had to go into therapy and start talking about it. So I found this wonderful community of survivors and started having these conversations with them. And that was just the turning point for me. Got out of that relationship as quick as I could. And as I started speaking out in documentaries, there were a lot of Jeffrey wannabes. There's a lot of Jeffrey wannabes out there who look up to men like him who were able to abuse all these women and they want to be just like them. And they're sick and twisted too. And they're perverted and they want to abuse women. A lot of men want to abuse women who have already had abuse. It's a thing for them. And I had people reaching out to me literally. You see me in a documentary talking about abuse and you want to date me? Why would you want to date me? I don't know. It's just weirdos that were reaching out to me. I had a man who befriended me, and found out 5 or 6 months later when I was alone with him, he literally wanted to abuse me in the exact same way that I had told him that Jeffrey did. So I was thinking, what is wrong with these men? So I just was freaked out about men as I started speaking out and I started realizing what really happened to me back then. And then learning with other women who were sent to the same men that I was when I thought I was going for an audition or I thought I was just meeting somebody career-wise, or that was hard for me to realize that we were kind of sent to the same men. It just was wrong, gross. You didn't have, I didn't say that I wanted that. I didn't say I wanted to meet those men for those reasons. I wasn't okay with it. And it just was hard for me to process. It just was really difficult to process because here I am. I come from like a really good home and a background of like, that's not supposed to happen to me. I'm better than that. And I'm worth more than that. But then it would feed into that like unworthiness, the boyfriend, not making me feel like I was worth anything by listening to me and being there for me. I had, friends that would just turn away from me and family members turn away from me and not hold space for me. So it was hard. It was hard for me. It really was. But I kept up with it. I kept the fight. I kept going. And little by little, I got stronger. I learned more about what really happened. I started connecting the dots with other survivors. And then there came that point where everyone's like, we need to do a podcast about it. And I'm like, yeah, go ahead. You do it. And everyone's like, no, Lisa, you need to do it. Like, I guess they thought maybe I had the most powerful voice and so I started thinking, I'm going to get out of the modeling business. My time is up. And it was hard because I'd been in that business since I was a teenager. So it was hard for me to make that transition. But I'm going to start speaking out and speaking up and being a voice for these women who feel helpless and they feel like they're worthless, and they live in shame about the abuse that happened to them, especially if they haven't found justice. And most, they don't see any justice. And so I would start talking to other survivors and many, many, many that would never speak out today. But every story, no matter if you're 14 or 24, the story is exactly the same when it comes to Epstein. And it mirrored so many of the other serial predators out there. The MO and a lot of their ways of doing things were the same. As I started the podcast, I would have these young girls that would come on, and there were all these other sex trafficking rings that were coming out of Vegas hotels and other areas in the U.S., Nashville, and of course, music industry is dark. But so many other like colleges and things that have so many things that are happening that people aren't really aware of. So I just started talking about all sorts of abuse. We went into stalking, we went into child abuse, and it was getting deep and heavy for me, but I just kept feeling like I've got to hold the space because every time I would speak to a survivor and they would tell their story, it opened up a whole nother Pandora's box of all these other survivors that saw the podcast and were like, I have a story to tell too. And we were getting inundated with like hundreds of survivors wanting to speak out. It just became this powerful movement. And as they were healing through talking to me, I was healing through my story too. And like, you don't really see it on the podcast, obviously, because we don't show it, but I have like breakdowns of just like crying. Like, I just can't handle it. And, like tissues and cleaning up after, because like, it's hard to take on not only their abuse and trauma, but some of it's really so dark. And if those are happening to regular people, what do you think is happening with these men who are powerful with all this money who can just abuse in any which way they can? And why do you think they don't speak out? Of course, they're never going to speak out, and they don't want to speak out. It's just, and I'm so grateful for all the people that do want to, because that's how we change, and that's how we shift the narrative, and that's really how we take the power back.
Right. Yeah, and you're doing a great job with the podcast. It's great. I highly recommend people check it out. I'm sorry that happened to you with your boyfriend. That's got to be, you hadn't told anyone until that point, right?
Nobody.
So
he was the first.
Yeah, and so I know, it seems like you don't want to talk about it because talking about it is reliving it, and it brings up all the shame and the fear and all those emotions. But when you put yourself out there and you stick your head out for a second, and then somebody just shoves you right back down, and I don't want to fault him. Obviously, that activated in his own insecurity. Which is, again, we all have our shit, but it's just unfortunate. I'm sorry that happened, and I'm glad you pushed through, and you're doing what you're doing now, because it's fucking awesome. And like, even right now, we're helping people, and like you said, it does kind of change the narrative, right? It makes it, you might be, somebody out there might have a story that they want to speak out about. And they might be watching you right now, 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, and saying like, you know what, this is the spark that I needed to get myself over the edge. And I think that's a wonderful, wonderful thing. So,
Yeah, I mean, it's just the way it is, right? I'm so thankful in a way that I had a boyfriend that didn't want to hear my story, and I had parents or I had family members that didn't want to hear during that time, because that's what made me look for others. That's what made me look for a support group. And that's the transition I had to go through, was finding that. If I hadn't found that, or I would have just stayed quiet, but finding that support group to me is always the first step, because then you start talking about it. And when you start actually speaking it out loud, that's where subtle transformation starts to happen in you. It really does. It starts to happen when you just get it out there, off of you, out of you, and just take that shame off of you. Like, the shame doesn't belong on me. What did I do? I didn't know any better at the time. It's not my fault. I had to realize it's not my fault. And then push that away and put it in a little box, deal with it when I need to deal with it. And then finding that like power within me to say, you know what, okay, what's the next step now? How do I help others through this?
And I'm just curious, like you mentioned some sort of childhood wounds. Things happen that activate things that are kind of dormant inside you that may not even be pertaining to that event, right? Did you feel that come up? Like, how did that?
Whew, yeah. That was probably the hardest part, even harder than dealing with Epstein, dealing with a broken relationship and marriage. I mean, I could see why those things happened. And a lot of people will say, oh, your childhood has nothing to do with it. But I kept this narrative through my whole life of I had this amazing childhood because I traveled all around the world. I had supportive parents, very high functioning parents. They gave me everything. I had everything I ever wanted. I never suffered. I had everything. But my therapist, I had an EMDR therapist, he just changed everything for me, because you go very deep with EMDR and you go into the childhood. And I kept saying, I had a great childhood. Can we just move on? I had such a good childhood. I kept that up probably for 6 months. And he's like, let's go back. And then he would just talk about, when I would speak about something that happened to me in my early 20s, he would say, well, when did that first, do you have any experiences of childhood that mirrors that? And I'm like, oh yeah, actually. And then when I started looking at my childhood, I started to realize I didn't have any support in childhood. I didn't have someone that I could talk to. I wasn't allowed to really speak out and have a voice. I always felt like, like kids are supposed to be seen and not heard. I didn't have that emotional love. Like, my father traveled a lot for work, and he always brought me gifts. Like, his love language, I think, was gifts. He always gave me gifts, and I always had everything I wanted gift-wise. My mom gave me lots of gifts. But if I had something that was going on, I could never go to them and talk to them about it. And a lot of therapists will say that's where the deep wound comes from. It's not that this happened to you, that was horrible. It's that you didn't have anyone to go to talk to about it. Right? And I didn't have anyone to say, when those things happen, to call up and say, you know what happened to me? I want to tell you, like, how can you help? Like, can you help me? I was trapped on an island and this happened. I never told anyone. I didn't feel safe enough with those primary caregivers to tell them anything. So everything in my life I kept in. Everything I kept in. And so I didn't have this emotional safety. That's why it was so triggering for me to have this boyfriend who I loved. It was like the first time I'd ever fallen in love. And I was so in love with this person, but he was saying, you're never going to have any emotional safety with me, because he didn't want to talk to me about anything. And into that day, and before that and after that, he never talked to me about anything. If I ever sat down with him and wanted to say, let's discuss this, it was always like, oh, nope, did nothing wrong, move on. We never had a deep discussion. So I was mirroring in that relationship exactly what I was mirroring in childhood, and choosing people who had this cold exterior, who never gave me an emotional safety. Actually never had in a relationship emotional safety with a man. And that's probably why Epstein was so easy to go through that with me, because he gave me emotional safety. He always listened. He always wanted to know my deepest, darkest, ambitions and things, and would talk to me like that in a way where I didn't have that. So I'm not saying I had a bad childhood. I just didn't have emotional security. I didn't have anyone to go and give me huggies and snuggle up to. And I'm the type of person like I have to have, like, I'm like that with my boys, or if I'm in a relationship, I just have to have that closeness. I just have to have it. And if you can't give it to me, it's like, we're not going to be a good match, So I just had to start realizing these things about me. So yeah, the childhood part was hard because EMDR therapy, I go 2 times a week for 2 hours every day.
2 hours each?
So twice a week, 2 hours each time. So close to 3-4 hours every week. So I deal with my own trauma, from childhood and from my early 20s or from relationships. I deal with all that. I talk about it. I use the lights. I do the pulsating. I do the stuff that goes right into those memories. So it goes really, really deep. And then I deal with the trauma from my guests. So it's like I have to deal with double trauma. I had a girl on once who was stalked, and a guy came to her room at night while she's sleeping, and she woke up and saw a man in her doorway. I mean, every woman's worst nightmare. Oh. And I tell you, I had to deal with that trauma. Her trauma, it wasn't even mine. I was like, I had to deal with it. And for weeks after, I'd wake up at night and make sure the door was locked, or I was so scared he was going to come for me, or somebody was going to. It was like, yeah, you hear people's trauma and it's like, oh my gosh, it's like you automatically think about your life. So almost every case that I would talk about, I would think, oh my gosh, that happened to me. That was what it was like in my marriage, or that was like in that boyfriend that wouldn't listen to me, or that was like in my childhood. So I would go through all those things. So it's a lot to take on. Yeah.
Well, like I said, you've done a lot of work. It sounds like not sounds like you are doing a great job with the podcast, but it sounds like you're in a good place, and I'm glad you're telling your story. I'll keep saying that. But I would be remiss if I didn't ask you. I think it's kind of come up subtly a couple times, but I have a lot of former intelligence officers on my show, and that kind of world we talk about a lot. And a lot of people speculate about Epstein's connections to intelligence agents C or C's. If he was a construct, if he was compromised, if he was selling to the highest bidder. You've mentioned that he likes to have stuff on people. That's pretty well known. Everything was wired for audio and video. But I guess my question is, from your lens, from your own experience, and from the experience of the other survivors and your community, would you ever see anything weird that you might want to tell people about? Anything stand out that is in that world?
Did I ever see anything weird? Almost everything was weird.
That's a good point.
I'm sorry. Everything on the island, everything in his house, everything didn't make sense. There were cameras everywhere. I saw the control room with all the cameras in every part of his house. So everything was recorded. So he knew who was coming and going. He knew what happened in the private rooms. Everything was confiscated from the house. So, and from the island. Emails, flight logs. They have everything. So, I would think he was definitely some form of intelligence. How could he not be? Which one, I'm not sure. Or it could be 2 or 3. I don't know exactly. I think at some point what I was seeing unraveling was he's getting in over his head. I think his obsession with all the girls maybe was a cover for what he needed to have things on people, but also I think his own obsession with it and having to ejaculate 6 or 8 times a day. He was a freak in that way. I think he was just getting in so much trouble and getting out of control. So I'm not sure if it's the chicken or the egg.
Right.
So I don't really know. I don't really know what Ghislaine's role was in it as well, because she was bringing in, there's some operation going on. It doesn't take an idiot to figure this out. There's an operation going on. Who's behind it? I'm not really sure. Who's all involved? We're never going to know. Don't think you're ever going to know who's involved. I'm sorry to tell you. The list can be made. Connections, connect the dots all you want to. Survivors can say. But I just feel like the people who are involved have a lot going in their favor, because nobody really wants it getting out there, as you can tell. Come on. They don't want it out there. Survivors, it was so long ago. I told you the men looked all alike. It's really hard to say, oh, it was that guy. I know his name. I know, it's just really hard. I don't think they're so nervous. Everyone says, oh, they're so nervous. List is coming out. They're not nervous at all. They know they're going to get away with everything. I just focus on the next step. survivors healing, just getting your stories out there, letting people know what's going on as much as we can, and educating. I focus more on that. That's what, for me, speaking out at Congress was about. I was actually speaking to survivors out there, like this podcast. Come tell your stories. Come tell it on mine, right? Just take your power back. If people want to connect the dots from your stories, that's fine. You have every right to tell your story. It happened to you. But when it comes to like reading a list on the House floor and everybody who wants to help out, I really do hope there is transparency and accountability and things do come to light. I just don't know how in our lifetime that's going to happen. I hope it does, but I just don't know.
Well, I hear that the survivors may be compiling their own list. And to your point, I think it's Thomas Massie and Marjorie Taylor Greene offered to read that list on the floor of the House because they can't be prosecuted for what they say there.
Yeah, that's true.
But something I've heard you say is, why should it have to be you? Why should you have to put yourself out there and go up against all these powerful people when the government is sitting on it? Why should it have to be you?
Yes, and when you say that, and when I spoke out and I said that for others to come forward and let's talk and let's create this list, you don't think that we already have a list from the last 6 years? You don't think all of our attorneys have already spoken to over 200, 300 people? For each fund that the survivors have come forward, there's been close to 300 girls that have come forward. They tell their full stories. There is a list from survivors. They never cared to have a list from us before. I was just trying to say, look, you can just think about releasing your list whenever you want to, but we can release our own list. For the last 6 years, we have all been talking about this. We all know what's going on. So we have this list. And now we can start building more on top of that list if we want to. We're just saying that, we have the power also to continue connecting the dots. We do.
So, I guess it's something I'm curious about, just from like on a personal level. Like these are, this is something I'm cognizant of on my show, is turning over stones like this. There's people that don't want these stones turned over. Are you cognizant of, do you fear for your safety?
Well, if you just take into account what I just said, I would say no. The reason is because I just think it's going to be very difficult to release names. It's going to be difficult to release names that you can actually back up, and prosecute. It's hard to say just because there's already information out there, but where is it? And I just think there's a reason why they don't release it, because they're protecting people. And for that reason, I don't believe it's going to happen. I mean, you hear some names, but I just don't feel that. I'm sorry. It's just hard for me. I'm going to do what I can. But I just feel like they have a grasp over it, so much so that it's going to be very difficult to get the truth.
So, again, this is, I think we said this in the beginning when the cameras are rolling, like this information has been held across multiple administrations on both sides of the aisle. And, Trump has been in the news a lot, and people like to assess that Trump is in the files. I don't know, if I were to think about it, the Biden administration had him too. They love releasing dirt on each other. If that was the case, I'm sure we would know about it. Or, I don't know, but I guess it's
protecting each other.
Protecting each other, or it just begs the question, like, is anybody more powerful than, the American president?
I would say so.
Do you want to say any more about that?
I wish the media would get off of Trump's ass. I really do. I think that there was stuff out there that would have been released already about him because they want to take him down so bad. I think they need to start looking at other people besides Trump, because the more they focus on Trump, the more that everyone else gets away with it. And that's what I've always thought.
That's a good point. And you brought up Virginia a couple times.
Virginia meant a lot. She meant a lot to me.
And she, I guess tell people if maybe they're familiar with Virginia's name, but if not, she committed suicide. Is there any, what do you think about that?
Well, I think it's heartbreaking. It just shows the cycle of abuse. Virginia had child abuse, that she had suffered from, which is why she probably was an easy prey for an Epstein and Ghislaine to bring, she just didn't have the self-esteem and they know it, they know. And they really abused her and trafficked her. It was bad with her. And she escaped him and went to Southeast Asia and ran off with a husband who really should have protected her. And I think she had a good relationship for a while, but the relationship turned really nasty and, there was a lot of domestic violence. Yeah. Unfortunately, which makes me, that's what I mean by heartbreaking for her life. It's so hard for survivors of abuse to get out of the trap of abuse. You just attract or bring in like the same type of abuse in just different faces. And I think he took her kids away from her in the end and turned her kids away from her. And real moms, what are you without your kids, And, she suffered a lot. She really did. I had a chance to meet her family, her brothers, Sky and Danny, incredible. Oh, they were just so incredible. They were with us in Congress and speaking, on her behalf and did a lot of press. And her sister-in-law, Amanda, just incredible people. And they were there to fulfill her legacy and to tell the truth out there and stand up for what's right for her. Virginia was a powerful, courageous woman. And she's the reason why I spoke out in 2019, 2020. Yeah, she was the reason. I wanted to support her story. I did. I got to speak to her a few times. Yeah, but people need to understand when it comes to being abused by someone like Epstein, a lot of survivors have taken their lives, become drug addicts, spiraled out of control, lost jobs. They can't cope. There isn't some big conspiracy theory of people just killing off survivors. Like you say, we live in fear. Powerful people aren't worried about us. They're not. So they're not killing us off. I know a lot of people think that and say that, but I don't believe it. I believe we're killing ourselves off. And the reason is because the pain runs so deep and sometimes you can't get out of it. Sometimes I wonder how I'm such a strong person. I've never dealt with suicidal thoughts or depression. And I think I have very high serotonin levels. I think I always have been kind of a happy person. I don't really know how to relate to that, but it doesn't mean there's many survivors that they go down a dark path after being abused by someone like an Epstein or others. Yeah, it's hard to deal with it because people don't listen. People shame you. All the trolls out there want to make you look like, watch all these comments, have everything horrible to say about me and I deserved it and I'm, wanted to have career success. Yeah, maybe I did want to have career success, but not like this. I can tell you right now, I would have passed on it if I'd known it was going to be like this.
Yeah, God forbid you want to be successful in your life, right?
Yeah, and there's almost there's movies about, powerful CEOs and people who are abusing women. This is not something new. This happens all the time. This is what we're trying to end right now. Is this happening? And women taking your power back, that you don't have to sleep with the boss to get a job anymore. You know what I mean? You don't have to do it. I said, women think they have to do these things. You have to play the part and you have to go out on dinner and like, oh God. Nobody wants to do it. Nobody wants to have sex with you to get a career. Like, let's make that known.
Yeah, and if you're a man, stop being a creep.
Yeah, stop being a creep.
Like, what are we doing here?
Stop taking advantage of your position.
Right. And again, going like you mentioned, people kind of coming up with theories around survivors that take their own lives, not actually taking their own lives. Like, I think I would rather people be I think it's good for people to be skeptics because it, in this case, protects the survivors. Like, if people just took everything at face value all the time, then I don't know if that's the world I want to live in, where we're just told something and we just believe it. But I guess right along that line, you mentioned in the very beginning of the interview about Jeffrey taking his own life. You used the words allegedly. So do you have the same feeling about that one, or do you believe that something else happened there?
I'm just going by what I know about Jeffrey during that time. Not any speculation. I just don't feel like he's the type of person that would ever need to take his life. Because I just feel like he just had so much on people that he probably felt like he was going to get off. That's the air he always had about him. He can do whatever he wanted to do. So I don't see why he would. I mean, and if you look deeper into it, I never looked into it. I was actually on Nancy Grace, and it was the first time I ever saw, she was putting all the images right in front of me while I was sitting there like, whoa, Nancy is I just had never seen anything going on. But I have talked to survivors since then, and nobody believes he killed himself. So nobody believes he committed suicide. And I think if you look at any of the evidence and stuff, it probably supports that. But it's just either way, it's just a horrible way to die.
He had just gotten away with things so many times. You look at the Palm Beach case, and you look at this like sweetheart deal that Alex Acosta, the district attorney for the Southern District of Florida, or the U.S. attorney for the Southern District of Florida, he cut him this incredible deal behind the scenes that basically included that he couldn't be prosecuted for his current crimes that he was accused of in the future, or accomplices that were accused in the future.
Yeah.
And Alex Acosta was, I don't know if this was on the record, but he was quoted as saying like, he belonged to intelligence when he had to defend that decision. Anyway, I got off on a tangent there, but my point was, to your point, he had gotten away with things so many times. So just because he was denied bail this one last time and he was sitting in a cell in New York.
Well, we know a lot more about Jeffrey Epstein today than we knew then. And I think Alex said that. He said that, right? Recently, he was like, well, you didn't really know what was really the magnitude of everything as he did then. And I don't think he had the power to do anything differently at that time. I mean, he seemed like he felt bad about it. I don't know. I just feel like sometimes these men, their hands are tied and there's nothing they can do about it. They may want to. I think they are well aware there were many abused young women and girls. They knew in that time in Florida, he knew, but I just feel like he didn't have the power to do anything differently. I just feel like that's the power that Jeffrey Epstein has and had, is that there was nothing he could do during that time. And now it's, 15, 20 years later, now you realize why he got that sweetheart deal. You kind of realize why he got that back then, because Jeffrey knew back then and his people knew what they were protecting. Yeah. I wish it had turned out differently. I wish the FBI had done something too in the late 90s when a lot of survivors called them to say this was going on. A lot of people made mistakes. Yeah. It would have saved hundreds of girls from being abused.
Are there, since you've come out with your story, and again, once again, being plugged into the network of other survivors, is there specific media institutions or media companies or specific institutions or people in particular that you feel have tried to suppress the voices of survivors and deplatform you guys and that sort of thing?
Yeah, I think after I spoke out in Congress with the other survivors, we've definitely been given a lot more respect and more of a voice now. But there's still so many people that try to flip the script and try to say anything to discredit us. So, of course, I still think that's there. Even the media, they'll interview us, and then what they actually put out, a lot of times it's like, oh, they didn't really say that like that, and they cut it to I remember like ABC had us, and we all had our names here, and they're like, oh, we're not going to use that. I'm like, yeah, because we don't want to be holding our names up, and then when they air it, we're sitting there holding our names up. So stuff like that, like, have some respect. It really kind of pisses me off because we said, is this going to be taped? Oh, no, we're just using that to identify you. No, they used it. That's just not okay. Like, who do they think they are? It makes me mad to think that you're so much more powerful than me. Like, you can just do that to me, and then ask questions and make it seem like, oh, like, maybe you knew what you were doing, Like, she was 14 years old. It doesn't matter if she knew what she was doing. She was 14, right? Yeah, maybe she wanted some money. There's nothing wrong with, okay, gosh, I'll go give a man a massage for money. There's nothing wrong with them making that decision. Why were they put in that predicament to make that decision? Why were there 40-year-old couple rolling around looking for 14-year-olds to do that? That is not okay. I have a 14-year-old. It's a little kid. He wants to bring his teddy bear, in Tokyo. We went to Tokyo and he brings a teddy bear home. Like, they're 14-year-old kids. So that's normally when, I don't know if you know this, but usually when you're a parent, that's when you see things differently. When you're not a parent, you kind of just like, oh, suppress it. Like, this didn't happen to me. I don't want to think about it. When you're a parent, you see the same age. And when I'm sitting there and they're holding pictures of them at 14 years old, they have little braces on, and it's like, what were you doing, Ghislaine and Jeffrey? Like, what were you doing? Looking for these girls and bringing them there and then giving them a sweetheart deal saying they're prostitutes. A prostitute is someone who knows they're hooking, they're looking to do that. And I'm sure even them at that age are groomed as prostitutes. But these are young girls that are just in school. They have nothing. They were preying on them. And even Ghislaine said later on, she was like, oh, they mean nothing to me. They're trash.
Yeah.
Like, no, they're not, actually.
Yeah, they're fucking human beings.
Yes, exactly. And that's why I love them. Oh, my God, I love them so much. In Congress, the hearing, they were all standing there in their power. They were like, F you, we're taking it back. Oh, you don't want to give us a list? We'll create it ourselves. Like, who are you to say? That's where we are, right? And it's so funny. I gotta tell you this. JP Morgan admitted to funding a sex trafficking ring. That's a fact. So there is a sex trafficking ring. But you know what he gave the survivors, 200-something of us? They gave us, thank you. You did us a favor. We'll come back to haunt you. They gave us 5 years of therapy. Any therapy we want, no matter how much it costs. And therapy is expensive. And therapy is what causes transformation in a human being. Not suppressing it. You get weaker. Illnesses and diseases and all sorts of stuff happens when you suppress horrible abuse or trauma that happens to you. But look what happens when you give us therapy. You know what I mean? You know how much that would cost? But we have free therapy. I don't know if people know that, but I want people to know that. The powerful women that you saw at the hearing at Congress, it was because we've had therapy, like really good therapy. So that's transformational. And that's where the power is coming from. We keep telling our story to a therapist, putting it away, releasing the shame, getting into our power. You just watch out now, because you're turning these survivors into powerful people that have platforms now, who aren't holding back anymore. We're fed up. We're here and we're not going to back down anymore, because things are going to happen. There may not be accountability with the full list of powerful people, but we're going to start chipping away as they have to. They're releasing things little by little, so we're chipping away at it, so it makes us feel better. It makes us come into our power a little bit better. And the most important thing is we're healing.
So last question before we end it on more of a positive note, which I like to do. There's this, there's this forgiveness sort of narrative, and that's laced into a lot of trauma stories, and people sometimes tell you or believe that you need to forgive your abuser or perpetrator in order to kind of move on. I guess what are your thoughts on that? Does that resonate with you?
Yeah, I hear that sometimes when people say I forgive them, and I don't know. Sometimes I feel like I've forgiven him. But I don't think so. I don't think so. I don't think I really go there completely in forgiveness with him. I just feel like it's better just to say, I have to just own what happened to me. That's all. It just happened. I have to own it and just think that it's for a reason. Right? Instead of just being like forgiven, I give all the power to you. I think it's more like I just like to take my power back. And me saying that means that I'm going to use that story that I own. I'm going to use that to do good. So it's more just a shift in power instead of just like, I forgive you. Oh, yeah, I forgive you. No, I just want to forget about that, but in forgetting it, I have to use it. Yeah, I have to use it. It's part of my story now. Yeah. I think I did that for 15 years, forgive and forget. I'm done with that. Now I'm just like, I want to remember it. I want to remember it, and then I'm going to own it, and then watch out with what I'm going to do with it.
Is there anything that you wish I would have asked you today along the lines of things maybe that you wish people asked survivors more?
I was going to say yes, but then you finished it with people that ask the survivors more.
Well, maybe you can address the yes first then.
Yeah.
Since something stands out.
What I was going to say to ask is, but then that's going to get right back into so much stuff. But there were some things that happened to me as a model that we didn't really get into. That connected some dots for me.
Do you want to get into any of that?
Well, it was something that happened to me that Jeffrey had set me up with, and the modeling agency that I was with at the time, I felt like they had set me up in a situation, and that was one of the worst things that had happened to me knowing Jeffrey. And I have an NDA, so I can't say who it is, but I just want to say that there were things that he did to me that were terrible.
Jeffrey did, or that the agency did?
Well, all three of them together. But what I'm talking about with Jeffrey, I don't want to stand here just because I say things of he's a mentor or I felt this way when he died. I want to say he did a few things that were very horrible to me, too. And I've finally gotten to that place now where I'm speaking out and talking about those horrible things. It took me years to get there.
So you have an NDA and you can't say who. Can you say what?
Well, that's what I was saying. There was a situation maybe a year after I knew Jeffrey that I had went to an event, a movie premiere in New York City. And Jeffrey had called me after and said, I want you to go to this restaurant. So-and-so is going to be there. It'll be a great party for you to go to. And I'm like, oh, well, okay. And my girlfriends and I were probably going to go stop by there anyway because it was a big party that night. It was a movie premiere after party. And so I had gone with my girlfriends, and Katie from Forward Modeling Agency and some other models showed up there as well. And there was a celebrity that was just all over me that night. And I was just like, leave me alone. And he was gross and old and like stunk, and like I could tell he was doing coke. I don't know. There was just like a very bad vibe coming from him. And I was just like, leave me alone. And he was like, yeah, bring a girl. We'll do a threesome. And all this. I was like, dude, leave me alone. He was so gross. And I remember telling Katie, about this guy or whatever. And I got away from him, and I was with my friends. And later on that night, Katie took us to some parties. And so we went to a couple parties, and then the last party, she was like, oh, we're going to go to a friend's house. The friend's house happened to be the same guy I told her that wouldn't leave me alone. So I was just like, why are we here? And it wasn't his house. It was his hotel suite that he always stayed at on the Upper East Side. Ironically, right around the house from Jeffrey. And so, long story short, I ended up going into the bathroom, and Katie and the girls ended up leaving. And when I walked out of the bathroom, I was there all alone with this guy that I was trying to get away from earlier. The same guy that Jeffrey had called me to go to the party, that was going to be there. So then I didn't know what was going on. I always thought, though, something was weird about that night, how it came together, how she left me there. And I was kind of angry during that time. So that always stuck in my mind. I had it in my journal. I knew all about that. I hadn't connected the dots on that until 15 years later, where I'm finding out things about that night, and from emails and my attorneys and things like that. I was deposed. I had to talk about that. And I would have never because I don't do that. I'm not trying to go after celebrities and saying, you were there and you did this, even the ones that one abused me. I never wanted to go and speak out, but the Adult Window Act was open, that I could go back that far. And because I spoke out, I was deposed for another case, and I had spoken out about that night because it had to do with some other girls. I was just like out there now. And so my attorney's like, we have to go after this guy. And I'm like, no way am I going after one of the biggest movie stars in the world. I'm not going after him. And then the adult window opened up, and then it was about to close, and they had sent him something, and he was just like, oh, whatever, I'll deal with that. I don't remember. And then we found like a Getty image, like an image from that night, all celebrities, but I was in that picture, and I was like, ew, like just like this with the celebrity. He's like, ugh. And I was like, ew. And I was like this little skinny little 5'9" and 115 pound, looked like a little boy, and little boy body, at that time. It's like, what? Maybe it was meant to be. Like, why was that there? And so my attorney sent it over, and that's why they were just like, oh, shit. So I settled. It didn't go public. It was going to go public the next day, and I did not want that. I did not want that because everybody would have known about that, and I don't want that out there. So I was just saying that's a really important part to my story, because that happened, and then we went through the J.P. Morgan discovery, and then through that discovery, I found out of the people involved and how deep that went, and that how my story was wrapped into really proof of what was going on. So there's all these like layers and like waves of like, what? Are you kidding me? And that's why I speak out today. It's really why I'm here, is because you're going to see, you're seeing now, these stories that didn't add up then, but now that we're going through this case, Virgin Islands, JP Morgan, survivors fighting each other, getting deposed, discoveries happening. There's a lot of truth that has come out. And because I've been speaking out and learning all this and in this with my attorneys, I've learned so much that gives me so many answers to what happened to me for those 3-4 years.
So obviously in the moment you couldn't necessarily see the forest for the trees, but now when you're looking back at it and going back to the theater of all of this, do you think that Jeffrey trafficked you to this movie star specifically, and this was all a big...
Yes, and I think that, yes, it all ties together, and the person who also was there was well known for knowing him and sending girls back and forth, so... I found that out later, and it just like, that broke me. It just disgusted me. It's like I had this whole career, and finding that out, like I'm a little pawn to you, like it just disgusted me. It really was a hard one for me to learn that And I didn't want to learn about it. I was actually just happened to have learned about it because of this window open, and I was deposed and just telling my story, like forced to tell my story.
What year was that?
This what happened in 2001, 2002. Yeah.
And so you signed an NDA, and obviously so that you couldn't discuss it in detail.
No. And I wish I hadn't, because now I have the podcast and I wanted to discuss.
Well,
I really do want to discuss what's going on, but yeah.
Happened the way it did. And you know, you were a kid. You're a kid.
I know.
You know, you weren't looking 20 years down the road and
yeah.
okay, maybe I'll have a podcast one day. Like, what the fuck is it, you know?
No, and who knew there would be a picture?
Well, right.
Who knew? Well, like, how did that? I just think the gods were looking out for me, because why that picture was there? I mean, you'd have to dig really, really deep. I mean, someone did a YouTube. There's a YouTube video of someone who was diving deep and found all the information. Like, sleuths are out there; they're good. And he was like, and you know it's Lisa because look at the beauty mark. You can match the beauty mark here to the picture back then. I was just like, man, like people really want to know about what was going on in that time, and that's the mauling industry for you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Man, well, I'm glad I asked you that question, but and to be fair, like I could sit here for another 3 hours. Like this has been so. I've enjoyed this so much. And shit, like I said, I could keep you here for another 3 hours. Unfortunately, we got to get you to the city. But I would say tell people where they can find you. But I guess more importantly, if there's somebody out there that's listening that is, you know, was in some sort of a similar situation, is in, you know, a domestic violence situation, whatever the details and specifics might be, like what would you hope that people take away from this right now?
Well, we're going into season 2 soon, and we're looking for survivors that have stories and impactful stories and healing journeys. If you become an author, therapist, TED Talk, whatever it is, that you're using your story for transformation for others, I definitely want to hear from them. So, yeah, I'm at I am Lisa Phillips on Instagram, and it's From Now On Pod on all social media. And we've wrapped up season 1, but go back and binge watch it. It's great. It has a lot of really good educational aspects to it for survivors and non-survivors. We did create it for you non-survivors out there who are just like, have something to say, but we want to educate you, you know, before you say something. So that's the most important thing. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, and we've talked about this offline. It looks great. Like from someone who notices that sort of thing, it's very well produced. The sound's good. The video's good. The guests are great. And you do a great job with it. But
Thank you.
yeah, this is, again, thank you so much for coming on. I hope this helps one person out there, because that's all it if it does help one person, then it's a massive win for me. Like I've said that on the last survivor I had on, I told you that offline, but once again, I have a feeling that it's going to help a lot more people than that. So thank you. This was fantastic, and I love what you're doing, and never stop talking.
Thank you so much. I love what you're doing. It's so easy to talk to you that I feel open enough to share. I've never shared this kind of stuff before, but it's because it's like I feel really comfortable with you. You're awesome. Thank you.
That's great to hear. Awesome. You guys, I'm sure you enjoyed it. Go check out Lisa. See you next time. What's up, guys? Thank you so much for taking the time to watch the interview. If you got anything out of this video at all, please like the video, leave me a comment, tell me what you thought of the video, tell me who you'd like to see on the show. I really appreciate the support. It goes a long way on these platforms, as you guys know. Most importantly, I have some excellent interviews coming up in the future that I'm really, really excited about. So please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of them. But that's it. Thank you for your support. I really appreciate it, and hope to see you again soon.